Chapter 17. On the set of Back to 17, Eric made a lot of mistakes while filming because he was thinking about Home Alone. But because the movie was coming to an end, Penny Marshall's temper was surprisingly good and she patiently corrected Eric's mistakes. Eric even had the idea of asking Penny Marshall for help, but he decided against it. If Penny Marshall knew, it meant that 20th Century Fox knew. With so many professionals at 20th Century Fox, they would obviously see the potential of this small-budget Christmas comedy and would definitely find a way to interfere. This was not what Eric wanted to see. In the end, Eric thought of the fake Loli who was cultivating in the rehabilitation center. In the future, Drew was still able to make a comeback and successfully get rid of the child star curse to become a famous actor, director, and producer in Hollywood. In addition to her own ability, her connections were also very important. Although this girl was only 13 years old, with her personality, her connections in this area were not to be underestimated. At least, it would not be a problem to ask her for help to form a small crew. On October 9th, the filming of Back to 17 was finally completed, and Eric successfully received a check for $500,000. Thus, he began to prepare for his next plan without stopping. "Eric, where are we going?" Jennifer Aniston sat in the front passenger seat and asked curiously. Eric took out the script of Home Alone from his bag and said, "Look at this first." Jennifer Aniston looked at the name and said in surprise, "Wow, Home Alone, is this your new script?" "Yes." Eric nodded and started the car. "I plan to shoot this movie myself." "What, Eric, are you kidding? Do you know where the camera button is?" "Of course I know. By the way, I want to be a director, not a cameraman." In his previous life, Eric had been in the industry for so many years. He had basically done all the jobs related to film and television, and they were all done well. All right. Then, where are we going now?" Eric hesitated for a moment before saying, "Let's go see Drew." And I brought you along because I don't want you to have any misunderstandings." "I want to ask Drew to help find some professionals to set up a crew. Although she is young, she knows quite a lot of people." Letting out a sigh, Eric parked the car by the roadside and unbuckled his seatbelt. "Looks like I have to convince a certain jealous girl today." "All right, don't be jealous. Let's go." Eric fastened his seatbelt and started the car again. "Hey, Eric, you can also ask Penny or James for help." "Why do you have to ask that guy?" In order to maintain her ladylike image in front of Eric, Jennifer Aniston quickly swallowed back the words, "bitch," and stuck out her tongue. Eric explained his concerns. Jennifer Aniston sat in the front passenger seat and gently clenched her small fists. She did not say anything else. When the two of them entered a well-known drug rehabilitation center in Los Angeles, they were searched to prevent visitors from bringing drugs in. Following the guidance of a staff member, Eric quickly found Drew. When he saw Drew, the girl was wearing very cool clothes and lying next to an open-air pool, sunbathing. She was also holding a hardcover edition of Jurassic Park in her hand. "Hey, Drew!" Eric shouted. "Eric, if you didn't come to see me, I would have escaped to find you." As soon as Eric spoke, Drew, who had already discovered him, shouted and jumped up from the recliner and quickly pounced on Eric. "Disgusting!" Jennifer Aniston, who was completely ignored by Drew, cursed with a dark face. Although she had a strong urge to pull Drew off of Eric, there were still a lot of people looking at them. Jennifer Aniston was not as thick-skinned as Drew. After fooling around for a while, Drew acted as if she had just discovered something and said to Jennifer Aniston, "Hey, fat girl, I heard that you passed out on the set because you wanted to lose weight. So pitiful. But you don't seem to have lost much weight." Just as Jennifer Aniston was about to explode, Eric knocked Drew on the head and said, "Okay, Drew, don't laugh at Anne. Take care of yourself." Drew groaned in pain and said with tears in her eyes, "Eric, you are so biased." Eric ignored Drew's pitiful appearance and said, "There are a lot of people here. Take us to your place." Drew's place was similar to a hotel suite. It even had a kitchen. The three of them went to the living room. Drew poured 2 glasses of juice for Eric and Jennifer Aniston and sat down on the sofa with a glass in her hand. She said, Okay, Eric, why are you looking for me? Can't I just come to see you? Eric was a little embarrassed. Drew pursed his lips. Are you bringing a big fat girl to piss me off? You know I don't like her. There was no one else around. Jennifer Aniston finally burst out the jealousy that she had been holding back for so long. I've had enough. You little b*tch, I don't like you either. Drew clicked his tongue with a smug look on his face. You've revealed your true nature, haven't you? Hee, Eric, look, the fat chick isn't a lady at all. It's all an act. You're going to suffer in the future. You? Eric rubbed his temples in distress. He secretly decided that he would try not to let the two of them appear together in the future. Okay, stop it. I'll get angry if you guys continue. Eric. Jennifer Aniston looked at Eric with a wronged expression. And, why don't you go outside and wait for me in the car? I'll be there soon. Drew's eyes lit up when she heard this. She quickly lowered her head as if nothing had happened and pretended to drink her juice. However, a woman's sixth sense was very sharp. Jennifer Aniston caught Drew's momentary joy. No, Jennifer Aniston refused with puffed-up cheeks. Eric had no choice but to appease her. Then, he took out the script and handed it to Drew. It's like this. Drew, here's a script. Can you introduce me to some professionals? I want to set up a temporary crew. Drew took the script and flipped through it. Soon, she chuckled. Hee, this is funny. This is a good script. Eric, you mean? Yes. Eric nodded. I want to produce this movie alone. I've done some calculations. It only needs about $1 million. I can probably afford it. However, it's only $1 million. So, I need some reliable and cheap professionals. In fact, there were countless people working in the film industry in Los Angeles. Even without Drew's help, Eric could put together a crew. However, on one hand, it would waste a lot of time. On the other hand, the people he found might not be reliable. If something happened during the filming, he would have no choice but to cry. While Eric wasn't paying attention, Drew glanced at Jennifer Aniston proudly. Then, she nodded obediently and said, No problem. I know a lot of people. Who do you need? Jennifer Aniston was angered by Drew's proud glance. However, she could only glare at Eric with puffed-up cheeks. Cameraman, lighting engineer, sound engineer. In short, Eric pretended not to see Jennifer Aniston's unhappy expression. He shrugged and spread out his hands. I don't have anything now. Drew thought for a while and said, I happen to know of a small film company that recently closed down. They had a film team. Unfortunately, the boss of the film company used the company as collateral for a loan. He made a movie himself and lost money. Now, the bank is probably going bankrupt and liquidating the company. That team is really good. I made a cameo appearance in their movie. If they haven't disbanded and gone their separate ways, you can take them all over. Well, compared to losing their jobs, I think they'll be more willing to take the job. Eric said excitedly, That's great. Drew stood up and smiled. I'll make a call for you. Hopefully, it's not too late. After Drew finished speaking, he walked to the phone by the window and dialed a number. Jennifer Aniston, who was sitting on the sofa, leaned over with resentment. Her small hand grabbed the hem of Eric's t-shirt and pulled it. She seemed to be very conflicted. She felt that she was very useless. Even Drew Barrymore could help Eric. Instead, she needed Eric's help to get a small role in the movie. Moreover, Drew was now openly trying to poach her. This made Jennifer Aniston even more uneasy. Soon, after making the call, Drew brought Eric a piece of good news. The film company was completely closed down. However, the team members were still in Los Angeles. The boss of the original company was very willing to introduce the team to Eric. After setting a time and place with the boss of the film company, Eric quickly got up and said goodbye. He didn't want to waste any more time. When he said goodbye, he forcefully asked for a kiss. Only then did Drew reluctantly let Eric go. On the way back, Jennifer Aniston was sullen. Eric could only keep comforting her. And, I'm sorry. I have no choice. Among the people I know, only Drew can help. Moreover, I have to rely on myself to find actors. Jennifer Aniston looked at Eric with some uncertainty. It's okay, Eric. I understand. Will you always love me? Eric said without hesitation, of course. I love you too, Eric. And? Yes. Be my girlfriend. Jennifer Aniston's face suddenly turned red. She was at a loss. Oh, Eric, I feel that No, little fool. Don't think so much. You just need to answer yes or no. Yes, I do. Chapter 18. Jennifer Aniston didn't attend the next date. Eric sent Jennifer Aniston home and went to meet the boss of the bankrupt film company alone. When they got out of the car, Jennifer Aniston suddenly said, Eric, can you give me a copy of the script for Home Alone? I'll take a look at it for you. Maybe I can give you some suggestions. Eric nodded and said, of course, no problem. I just made a few copies. Jennifer Aniston got out of the car with the script and waved her small hand as she watched Eric drive away. As if she had made up her mind about something, she turned around and walked into her apartment. In a coffee shop in Burbank, Eric met the boss of the small film company called Firefly that Drew had introduced to him, Jeffrey Hansen. He was a white man in his 50s and looked a little haggard. It seemed that the bankruptcy of the film company had hit him hard. He looked very dispirited. Eric knew that it was best for a person to vent in such a situation, so he wasn't in a hurry to talk about the film crew. Instead, he patiently listened to the man who needed to talk about his past. Did you know that my wife, Selena, was a top student at the University of Southern California Film Academy? She and Francis Coppola were classmates. It's a pity that she's just a farm girl from Maryland and doesn't have the deep heritage of the Coppola family. Otherwise, her achievements in the film industry would definitely be higher than Francis. She won many awards for the short films she shot in school. At that time, I was studying finance. Everyone called me a bookworm. I don't know why, but my young, beautiful, and talented wife fell in love with me. She said that she wanted to be a director, so I stayed in Los Angeles with her. We started from the most basic positions and worked together for about 9 years. I still remember how happy Selena was when she got her first investment for her script. That smile was even brighter than when I put the ring on her finger when we got married. Later, we opened Firefly Film. She was the director, and I helped her as the producer. We took care of everything. We made several films together and made money for the investors. We even won a special jury award at the Venice Film Festival. Unfortunately, an accident happened when Selena drove back to Maryland to visit her parents a year ago. Jeffrey Hansen's voice began to choke as he spoke. It could be seen that he had a deep relationship with his wife. Eric, who was sitting opposite him, handed Jeffrey a tissue and waited quietly for him to continue. After my wife passed away, I felt that I should inherit her dream. She always wanted to develop Firefly and become a director recognized by the Oscars. I thought that after being a producer for so many years, I was more than qualified to be a director. So I mortgaged the company and raised a sum of money to shoot my first movie in memory of her. Unfortunately, the result was not very good. It's okay, Jeffrey. It's just a failure. Which director in Hollywood hasn't experienced failure before? Jeffrey wiped his wet eyes and said, Thank you, Eric. I feel much better now that you've listened to me for so long. After the company went bankrupt, my son almost cut off all ties with me. He didn't want me to be a director in the first place. He felt that I had destroyed his mother's years of hard work. I don't blame him, I just regret it. Well, let's not talk about this. I heard from Drew that you need some people to help you make a movie? Eric nodded. Yes, but it's just a small budget movie with a budget of $1 million USD. Jeffrey shook his head. No, $1 million is a lot. My wife only used $700,000 for her first movie. By the way, can I know your age? Of course, I'm 18 now. Jeffrey, you don't think that I'm too young and impatient, do you? No, I just want to make sure that you're an adult and a fully capable person. After all, 1 million USD is not a small amount.
Oh.
Jeffrey said, "Don't be like this, young man. I think you're the one who's not confident. I don't have any prejudice against young people. Many directors make their best movies when they're young. The older they are, the more mediocre the movies they make. Young people are always full of creativity. Movies are a job of creating dreams. Moreover, I believe that my team can help you make your movie very well. They're all trained by my wife. They're very professional and have a lot of chemistry. Unfortunately, because of me, they're going to lose their jobs. It's a good thing that they can get your movie. Well, by the way, can I take a look at your script?" "No problem." Eric took out the script and handed it to Jeffrey. Then, he quietly waited for Jeffrey to flip through his script. More than 10 minutes later, Jeffrey closed the script and returned it to Eric. "A good comedy script. It's not complicated to shoot. It's very suitable for practice. I have to say that you're very wise to choose such a script." Eric put the script back into his backpack and said to Jeffrey, "Then Jeffrey, can you help me be the producer of this movie?" Jeffrey Hansen was puzzled. "Eric, are you sure? My company just went bankrupt because of me." Eric said, "Jeffrey, you may not be suitable to be a director, but based on your description, I think you're a very good producer. If this movie is successful, I'll set up my own movie company. Then, you can help me manage it. I can also take over all the team left by your wife. They won't have to lose their jobs." Jeffrey was obviously moved. He was originally disheartened and planned to go back to his hometown's farm to spend the rest of his life. But when he heard Eric's plan, he had a different idea. The team left by his wife had worked with them for many years. They were not just employees, but very good friends. Because of his mistake, his old friends lost their jobs. Jeffrey was quite guilty. Without thinking for a long time, Jeffrey nodded and said, "Okay, Eric, I promise you." Then, happy cooperation. Eric excitedly picked up a cup of coffee and clinked it with Jeffrey. The cooperation between the two people was officially established. Then, the two people began to go straight to the topic to discuss the preparation work for Home Alone. During the discussion, Jeffrey also learned about what Eric had done during this time. He couldn't help but be a little surprised. Since the cooperation had been confirmed, Eric also told Jeffrey his plan. "I plan to finish the movie in about a month, and then take advantage of the influence of Jurassic Park and Back to 17 to release Home Alone during the Christmas season. I think that in order to give a director's halo to the screenwriter and lead of Back to 17, to create a greater box office profit, 20th Century Fox will not be stingy in releasing Home Alone. So, as long as we work hard to make the movie, this family-friendly Christmas comedy will definitely make us a lot of money." Eric thought of the box office of Home Alone that was recorded in the Guinness Book of Records in his previous life. His heart was full of longing. Even if Home Alone only got half of the box office of his previous life, it was more than enough for him to realize his dream. The two people discussed in the coffee shop until the lights were turned on. After confirming a lot of things and exchanging contact information, Eric drove home. Just as he arrived home, Eric received another piece of good news. Runkle and his wife agreed to let Stuart play Kevin. Eric roughly discussed the details with the couple. Runkle and his wife also agreed to Eric's proposal of $50,000 and 1% of the box office earnings. Although the salary was only 1/10 of what Eric received in Back to 17, if the box office results were as amazing as in his previous life, just 1% of the box office earnings would be enough to make the couple smile from ear to ear. Eric didn't feel bad about it. After all, the movie needed Stuart Runkle to play the lead. The next day, Eric asked Jeffrey Hansen to sign the contract with Runkle and his wife. The couple also knew that Eric would be the director of the movie. The couple, who were originally hesitant, immediately signed the contract after seeing the $50,000 check that Eric specially prepared. The next step was to prepare the funds. Eric originally had $590,000. After negotiating with Michael Krause, Michael happily agreed to give him an advance of $200,000 in royalties within 10 days. After the piano shop owner checked it, he reluctantly agreed to return the goods. However, he still calculated the depreciation fee of $2,000. In the end, he was still short of $200,000. Eric gritted his teeth and contacted a pawnshop. Very quickly, he mortgaged the house for $200,000 with a 10% interest every month. If he couldn't pay it back in 6 months, the pawnshop would take back the house. To put it bluntly, it was a F***king loan shark. Looking at the check in his hand, Eric sighed. Now he was cutting off all means of retreat. If he failed, he didn't know if Jennifer Aniston would take him in. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but think of Drew. With the experience of a 40-year-old uncle in Eric's body, how could he not see that Drew already liked him to the bone? If possible, after filming Back to 17, Eric didn't want to have too much to do with Drew. Perhaps his feelings for Drew were more like that of a daughter than a woman. Maybe after a long time, the girl's feelings for him would slowly fade. But for the sake of Home Alone, he had no choice but to look for Drew's help to once again entangle the two of them together. After the shooting funds were all prepared, Eric and Jeffrey began to pick actors for the crew. Eric's plan was to let the two stupid thieves Harry and Marvin choose from comedians. Unfortunately, he sent out invitations to a few of them, but they either couldn't match their schedules or felt that the pay was too low. After rushing around for 2 days, Eric suddenly received a call from Jennifer Aniston. "What? You said your father wanted to treat me to a meal?" Over the phone, Aniston's voice was excited. "Yes. Haven't you been worried about the cast of Home Alone for the past 2 days? I told Dad about this matter and he agreed to help you contact some comedians." Jennifer Aniston's tone was very relaxed, but Eric knew that the matter wasn't that simple. At the same time, he was somewhat moved. Jennifer Aniston's relationship with her biological father, John Aniston, was very cold. John Aniston abandoned his wife and daughter for his career, and Jennifer Aniston was still brooding over it. In the previous life, John Aniston made great efforts to make his stubborn daughter forgive him. It could be seen that Jennifer Aniston's request for her father's help wasn't as easy as she said. Eric gratefully said, "Thank you, and I'll be there on time." Chapter 19. I Don't Like You, Mr. Williams. Taking advantage of his daughter going to the bathroom, John Aniston sat across from Eric with a taut face. Eric was somewhat speechless and could only shrug. "May I know why, John?" John Aniston said, "Jenny has always hated me for so many years. I also feel very guilty about what happened that year and have always hoped that she would forgive me. Did you know that she called me last night? It was the first time she took the initiative to call me. I was so happy that I almost jumped. In the end, my daughter called me because she wanted me to help her boyfriend, the guy who might snatch my daughter away. Well, this reason was very strong. The saying that a daughter was her father's lover in his previous life wasn't just a saying. Usually, the relationship between father-in-law and son-in-law wasn't very good." Eric could only shrug once again. The two men suddenly sank into an awkward silence. Jennifer Aniston soon returned from the bathroom and sat next to Eric with a smile. Her intimate appearance made John Aniston even more unhappy. But it was already very difficult for his daughter to take the initiative to reconcile. He wouldn't be so stupid as to lose his temper on the spot. With Jennifer Aniston's mediation, the meal seemed to be quite pleasant on the surface. John Aniston used his status as an elder to reprimand Eric for biting off more than he could chew. His daughter glared angrily at him. In the end, John Aniston agreed to help Eric find actors as much as possible. With the help of John Aniston, who had a lot of connections in the television industry, Eric quickly found actors for most of the roles. Moreover, because of John Aniston's mediation, the pay wasn't high. This made Eric sigh in relief. Only the stupid thief duo, Marvin and Eric, were a bit hesitant about the few candidates. Until Jennifer Aniston brought her classmate and good friend in front of Eric. Looking at that naturally weak face, after a bit of screen testing, Eric decided. Because this guy was called Matthew Perry, one of the 6 members of Friends, in his previous life. Next, Eric and Jeffrey Hansen flew to Canada a few times and finally found the shooting location for Kevin's house in a small town. Working day and night, Eric lost a few pounds in a short week. Jennifer Aniston, who found out about this, felt distressed and envious. On the 17th of October, Eric's first directorial work after his rebirth officially started shooting in Los Angeles. The crew sent a few people to the small town in Canada to set up the set for Kevin's house. Most of them stayed in Los Angeles to shoot the airport, the police station, and other scenes that didn't require snow scenery. After all, this was the world's largest movie studio, so shooting here was a lot more convenient. The whole crew, from the lighting technician to the actors, only agreed to shoot this movie because of the money and the face of Jeffrey Hansen and John Aniston. Even though they had a lot of misgivings about Eric, it wasn't like they didn't have their own thoughts. Using Eric's words from his previous life, what if it accidentally becomes popular? They had already understood the content of The Kid in Charge. They were very glad that this director, who was a little too young, did not make artistic films like other young directors. Therefore, they felt that the possibility of The Kid in Charge was still relatively high. With a filming cost of $1 million, relying on the halo brought by Eric's Back to 17 and Jurassic Park, he might be able to make a small profit. Moreover, Eric had promised when the film started that if the film made money, he would give everyone extra dividends. After all, he provided a job opportunity for his wife's team. After the movie started shooting, Jeffrey Hansen showed up on set every day on time. Originally, Jeffrey wanted to use his many years of experience to provide some help to Eric, a newbie. But after one day, Jeffrey started to doubt his life. God is so *king unfair. Eric didn't panic at all, as it was his first time directing a movie. From the moment the camera started shooting, he was like a director with many years of experience. He methodically discussed the placement of props with the scenographer, used very professional terms to discuss the next shot with the cameraman, directed the lighting technician to create the effect he wanted, and patiently explained the scene to the actress who was playing Kevin's mother, who was more than 10 years older than him. Of course, when there were continuous mistakes in some scenes, it also showed the talent of the director's race. The director's roar. Ms. Leslie, what I want is a confused expression. It's confusion, not curiosity. According to my observation, you must have some obsessive-compulsive disorder, so this expression should be easy for you. Imagine lying in bed at night, thinking that you might have forgotten to lock the door, or that the faucet in the kitchen might be dripping, but you can't be sure what the problem is, so you're caught up in the feeling of conflicting emotions. Imagine these scenarios. Oh, D***, we can only rent this plane for 3 hours, 3 hours. Okay, everyone, get ready, let's do it again. Nickel, do you want to see the clouds in the sky through the titanium alloy ceiling of the plane? Be serious, F***ck. Because of Eric's outstanding performance before, everyone in the crew basically recognized Eric's position as a director in a short period of time. Therefore, when Ms. Leslie, who played Kevin's mother, remembered the mistakes in the scenes where Kevin was forgotten at home, Eric became anxious because the shooting plan might be disrupted, and he couldn't help but roar. Everyone unconsciously forgot about Eric's age and became silent. When the 30-year-old cameraman named Nickel Frank was reprimanded by Eric, he completely forgot that the young man in front of him was only 18 years old. He subconsciously apologized, "I'm sorry, Director Williams, I'll pay attention." Many years later, when Nickel Frank, who won the Oscar for Best Cinematography, stood on the podium of the Kodak Theater, the first sentence he said was to recall this scene. He said, "At that moment, subconsciously, I completely regarded Eric as an authoritative director, not an 18-year-old young man. It was as if he was born to lead the whole crew." After another NG, the scene finally passed. Eric breathed a sigh of relief and immediately regretted his gaffe. He took the initiative to apologize to Ms. Leslie. "I'm sorry, Ms. Leslie, my tone was a bit harsh just now." "It's okay, Director Williams. It's my fault. I should be the one apologizing. Speaking of which, you were quite charming when you were angry just now." Eric wanted to remind her that this was the precursor of Stockholm Syndrome, and that she needed treatment. In the next few days, Eric found that the crew members, who used to call him Eric, unconsciously changed the way they addressed him and called him Director Williams, including Jeffrey Hansen. He knew that this meant that the crew members completely recognized his performance as a director from the bottom of their hearts. Therefore, he commanded the crew more easily. It took only 4 days for the crew to complete the scene in Los Angeles and move on to the small town in Canada. Before that, the crew had sent several staff members to set up Kevin's house. Although he only directed them through the phone, Eric was very satisfied with the layout of the apartment. At the same time, he made up his mind to win over the team left by Jeffrey's wife. No one had ever made a movie in this small town in northern Canada, so the residents of the town were very enthusiastic and curious. Before Eric arrived, many people had already asked if the staff sent by Eric could make some cameo appearances. Moreover, because it was a Christmas scene, all the residents of the town took the initiative to decorate their homes. The whole town was full of joy, as if it was Christmas in advance. In the face of this, Eric, of course, had to return the favor. He generously invited several children in the town to make cameo appearances in the movie. The main filming in the small town was the life of the little protagonist, Kevin, and the process of making fun of the 2 stupid thieves. As a pure Christmas comedy, the movie did not need to have any meaning. It only needed to be funny. In addition, Stewart's performance was much better than Macaulay Culkin's in his previous life. The filming progress could only be described as fast. Eric was sure that he could complete all the scenes in a week. During this time, something else happened. Penny Marshall, who was nervously working on the post-production of Back to 17, suddenly realized that they could not find Eric when they needed him to dub for some scenes in the movie. He did not pick up the phone. She went directly to Eric's house, but the door was closed. This made Penny Marshall think of some bad things. Just as she was about to call the police, she found out about Eric's whereabouts through Jennifer Aniston. Penny Marshall complained over the phone. She ordered Eric to return to Los Angeles within a week. In addition to the dubbing of the movie, the promotion of Back to 17 could not be done without Eric's participation. Of course, the fact that Eric was filming Home Alone was naturally exposed. Regarding this, Penny Marshall naturally acted like an elder and criticized Eric for biting off more than he could chew. However, she did not take Eric's movie to heart. Unlike the staff in Eric's production team, she naturally felt that the movie was just a young man's mischievous work. Eric, who was immersed in his work, was basically a different person from the real world. Although he got along well with the people in the production team, that was all. On the other hand, Matthew Perry, who was introduced by Jennifer Aniston, would occasionally chat with Eric. Eric was also very interested in Matthew Perry. Unfortunately, his goal of completing Home Alone was more important than anything else. Of course, he did not have the opportunity to have a deep relationship with Matthew Perry for the time being. A week later, the movie was successfully completed in the small town. Due to Jeffrey Hansen and Eric's reasonable planning, they had only spent more than $600,000 so far. They still had more than $300,000 left, which was more than enough to complete the post-production. Therefore, Eric generously held a party in the small town and invited the crew and everyone in the small town to party for the night. The next day, while many people were still hungover, Eric had already boarded the flight back to Los Angeles with the completed film. After spending half a day, he completed the dubbing of Back to 17. Eric plunged into the post-production studio that Jeffrey had introduced and started working like a madman. For the past few days, Eric had been working more than 16 hours a day. It only took him 5 days to complete the post-production work of the movie under everyone's shocked gazes. Because everything in his mind was ready-made, Eric was able to complete everything so quickly. It took him less than a day to perfectly edit all the scenes. The editor who worked with him now looked at him with admiration. 5 days later, in the morning, more than 10 people were crowded in a simple screening room with only 5 or 6 seats. Most of them were the crew of Home Alone. Jennifer Aniston also specially came to watch Eric's work. Amidst the slight buzzing of the projector, the movie officially began with a blue silhouette of a house under the hazy moonlight. Chapter 20. Although everyone in the theater, including Jennifer Aniston, who did not participate in the filming, clearly knew the content of The Kid in the Home, but as the plot progressed, especially when one was torturing the 2 stupid thieves, the laughter in the theater came one after another. Even an old man in his 50s like Jeffrey Hansen could not help but laugh. The 1 hour and 40 minutes movie unknowingly ended. When the last line of subtitles ended, everyone stood up and applauded together. I have to say, this movie is really outstanding. Eric, I think I should congratulate you in advance. Jeffrey Hansen patted Eric's shoulder and said seriously. Thank you, Jeffrey. Also, thank you everyone. Without your help, I would not have been able to complete The Kid in the Home in just half a month. Everyone exchanged pleasantries and flattered each other for a while before gradually dispersing. After all, everyone had their own things to do. They originally planned to have a small celebration party, but unfortunately, when they saw Eric's unshaven and tired face, they consciously gave up on the idea. Eric had overdrawn too much energy in the past half a month, and everyone knew that he needed a good rest. The next step was to contact the movie's distributor. It just so happened that tomorrow was the screening of The Kid in the Home. Eric felt that this might be an opportunity to promote The Kid in the Home to 20th Century Fox. He believed that as long as the executives of 20th Century Fox saw this movie, they would definitely agree to his distribution plan, even if they had to give up some of the profits in the end. After all, he did not have a foundation yet. Perhaps it would be easier to promote The Kid in the Home after The Kid in the Home was released, but by then, the new year would have already passed. As a Christmas comedy, it was definitely not a good choice to release it at any other time. He could not wait until next year. He had already put in so much effort, and seeing that the plan was close at hand, he did not want to delay it for another year. Jennifer Aniston, who only had a temporary driver's license, drove Eric's car back to Eric's house. Eric put away the copy of the film and told Jennifer Aniston to take care of it. Then he dove into bed, unwilling to open his eyes again. Jennifer Aniston originally wanted to let Eric take a bath before going to bed, but when she saw that Eric had already fallen into a deep sleep with an obviously tired expression on his face, she could only sigh softly with heartache. She took off his clothes and shoes, covered Eric with a blanket, and turned to leave the bedroom. Eric's house was already full of dust because it hadn't been cleaned for more than half a month. Jennifer Aniston rolled up her sleeves and found some tools to start cleaning. In Friends, Rachel was a spoiled girl who didn't know how to wash her clothes even when a washing machine was placed in front of her. In reality, Jennifer Aniston was already self-reliant. On the desk in the study, Jennifer Aniston picked up a thick book called Basic Theory of Music and wiped the dust on the desk with a rag. Suddenly, a document slipped out of the book in her hand. Jennifer Aniston curiously picked up the document and found that it was a house pawn agreement. God knows how much time had passed. At noon, he seemed to feel Jennifer Aniston asking him if he wanted to eat something, but Eric drowsily rejected her and fell asleep again. When he woke up, the bedroom was already dark. Eric turned on the light and looked at his watch. It was already past 9 o'clock in the evening. And should have already left, Eric thought. He put on his clothes and walked out of the bedroom. He could vaguely hear the sound of the TV in the living room. Walking down the stairs, he saw Jennifer Aniston curled up on the sofa with a pillow in her arms, watching a TV show. Hi, and good evening. Eric walked over and kissed Jennifer Aniston on the cheek. You're awake, Eric. Go take a shower, I'll make you something to eat. Eric didn't notice the strange look on Jennifer Aniston's face. He responded and turned to the bathroom. After spending half an hour taking a shower and shaving his face, Eric walked out of the bathroom. Jennifer Aniston had already returned to the sofa with a prepared dinner in front of her. Oh, and I'm really surprised that you know how to make Chinese egg fried rice. It's very fragrant. Eric took a bite and praised. You said you liked it, so I learned how to make it. With a smile on her face, Jennifer Aniston looked at Eric, who was wolfing down the food. She patiently waited for Eric to finish eating before saying, Eric, did you pawn the house? Eric was about to bring the tableware back to the kitchen when he heard Jennifer Aniston's words. He raised his head in confusion. He didn't tell anyone about this, so how did Jennifer Aniston know? When I was helping you clean the room, I happened to see this fall out of a book. Facing Eric's confused gaze, Jennifer Aniston took out the pawned document from under the coffee table. Eric had to put down the tableware, took the document and glanced at it. He nodded and said, "The filming of Home Alone is still short of 200,000 yuan, so I had to pawn the house." The piano in the study is also... Jennifer Aniston had been to Eric's house a few times before and liked the Strauss piano very much. Eric nodded again. Jennifer Aniston frowned with some distress. "Eric, I think you're too impulsive. Although the screening of Home Alone today was good, if it fails, you could go bankrupt at any time. Don't worry, and... You see, a few months ago, I was just a penniless high school student. Now, in just a few months, I've successfully published my own novel, written a script, and played the role of the male lead. Now, I've even produced a movie. How many people can do this at my age? So, even if it fails, I believe that with my ability, I can easily stand up again. We're still so young, so of course we have to give it our all a few times. Whether it succeeds or fails, at least we've cried and laughed. Otherwise, when I'm old and gray-haired, when I recall my life, it will be dull and uneventful, like a tiny meteorite without even a trace of light in the sky. What a pity that will be. Oh, Eric, when you say this, you're so charming. I think you're just seducing me, you bad guy." The morning sun hit her face. Jennifer Aniston's eyelashes trembled. She subconsciously turned over to avoid the disturbing light and soon woke up. Eric walked into the bedroom with a tray. Seeing that Jennifer Aniston had woken up, he smiled and said, "Hi, baby, good morning." Jennifer Aniston pouted and said, "Not good at all, you bastard." "Okay, I apologize. In order to express my apology, I specially spent an hour making delicious pork rib soup for you." "No way, I'm still on a diet. Today's situation is special, so forget about losing weight for the time being. Come, have a taste." "Oh, I haven't brushed my teeth yet." "I'll carry you." "You're so annoying." After the warm breakfast, Jennifer Aniston could only ask for leave from the convenience store owner because of her inconvenience. The convenience store owner seemed to be used to this kind of thing. Many young people working in Los Angeles with dreams of becoming stars would ask for leave from time to time to try their luck with some crews. The convenience store owner also knew that Jennifer Aniston was one of them, so when Jennifer Aniston accepted the job, both sides had already reached an understanding. The two of them cuddled for a while, then Eric had to drive home. Today was the day of the screening of Back to 17, and he wanted to see if he could get the release of Home Alone. At around 10 o'clock in the morning, dozens of people, including the publicity department of the distribution department and the representatives of the producers of Back to 17, gathered in the luxurious screening room of 20th Century Fox. The producer of Back to 17, the director, Penny Marshall, and other actors who didn't have jobs were also present. Before the movie started, Eric came to James Brooks and Penny Marshall, hoping that the two of them could help introduce him to the head of the distribution department of 20th Century Fox. "Eric, you mean, you want your small-budget movie to be released on Christmas?" James Brooks was a little surprised. He also knew from others that Eric had made a movie after completing Back to 17, but he didn't expect it to be completed so quickly. "Yes, James, it's a very interesting Christmas comedy, so it's best to release it on Christmas. Other times are definitely not suitable." James Brooks was a little disdainful. Although Eric had surprised him many times since he met him, he absolutely didn't believe that a newcomer like Eric could make any interesting comedy movie. As a screenwriter and actor, Eric could be said to be talented, but if a director didn't rely on talent, it would require years of experience. However, for the sake of face, he still agreed to help introduce him. Chapter 21. The pilot of Back to 17 was a great success. Both the executives of 20th Century Fox and the representatives of the cinema chains were optimistic about the movie. If Eric hadn't shown up during the Thanksgiving and Christmas period, 20th Century Fox would have released Working Girl, starring two superstars, Harrison Ford and Sigourney Weaver, on December 23. Now that Back to 17 was released, the Thanksgiving period in November could be filled with this movie. After discussion, Return to 17 was confirmed to be released on November 18. Eric was very satisfied with the release date. From the movie schedule information from 20th Century Fox, Eric found that there was not a single high box office movie in his memory in the entire month of November. It was simply tailor-made for Return to 17 to quietly enter the village. Among the movies released in December, Rain Man, Brother Dragon and Brother Mouse, and Whitehead Detective were among the top 10 in the North American box office in 1988. Near noon, James Brooks finally led Eric to a middle-aged man in his 40s. This was Calta Hunt, the director of distribution at 20th Century Fox. After the introductions, James Brooks left the two alone. Although he had a good impression of Eric, they were not related, so he wouldn't waste his time speaking for Eric's low-budget movie. "Hello, Mr. Calta." Eric shook hands with Calta. Calta also politely praised Eric's acting in Back to 17. However, after Eric explained his intention, Calta refused without thinking. "I'm sorry, Eric. The company's release schedule for this year is full. It's impossible to squeeze in another low-budget movie, so I can only say sorry." This excuse was very far-fetched. If it was Spielberg who recommended his own movie, Carter Hunter would have cried and begged for his help. Although Calta rejected him outright, Eric still argued, "Mr. Calta, can we watch my movie first? I just happened to bring a copy with me. You only need to spend an hour or so to watch it. I swear it's a great movie." Calta shook his head again. Most of the small companies that tried to sell their movies to him used the same excuse, especially recently. Due to the upcoming hot season, many film companies that did not have their own distribution channels were trying to sell their movies to him. He had seen a few of them because of some favors, but they did not have much commercial value. Therefore, it was even more impossible for him to waste his time on an 18-year-old's low-budget comedy. "Eric, you know that I'm very busy right now. I have to arrange the release of Back to 17, and I have to go to the headquarters for a meeting in the afternoon, so I have to apologize." Eric was not a person who gave up easily. After a few shameless pleas, Calta finally impatiently found an excuse and left. "Eric, what's the result?" Penny Marshall asked when she returned to the group she knew. Eric shook his head with a bitter smile. Penny Marshall patted Eric on the shoulder and comforted him. "Don't be discouraged, Eric. Movie distribution also costs. Many movies cost more than the production cost. If the box office is not ideal, the person in charge has to take responsibility. So, you should understand, Calta. You must have spent a lot of money to produce your own movie. After this busy period, I can introduce you to a videotape distribution company. After Back to 17 is released, with your fame, you can more or less recoup some funds by directly releasing the videotape. And I think you should spend more energy on screenwriting and acting. You have a good talent. If you keep your feet on the ground, you will achieve something." "Thank you, Penny." Eric thanked him, but he felt a little bitter in his heart. Everyone seemed to think that Home Alone was an experimental movie for him, a rookie. He really wanted to tie everyone present to their seats and force Home Alone to play once. Unfortunately, he needed God's help to carry out this idea. He returned home a little depressed. Since 20th Century Fox had no chance, he could only try other movie companies. Jennifer Aniston was curled up on the sofa in the living room like a cat, watching a BBC soap opera in boredom. When she saw Eric open the door and come in, she poked her head out and asked, "Eric, how's it going?" Eric walked over and hugged Jennifer Aniston, rubbing her back and said, 20th Century Fox rejected it, but it doesn't matter. I will try other movie companies. Jennifer Aniston felt the faint disappointment in Eric's tone. She hugged her boyfriend's waist and raised her beautiful face to comfort him. "It doesn't matter, Eric. Home Alone is so good. It must be their loss if they rejected it. I believe that after Home Alone is released, they will regret what they did today." "Oh baby, your words are so warm." Eric pinched Jennifer Aniston's face. The two couldn't help but kiss. After a while, the phone rang. After a few rings, Eric reluctantly let go of the girl under Jennifer Aniston's push. "Hello, this is William's house." "Jeffrey, hello. What's the matter?" Eric listened to the voice on the phone and suddenly raised his eyebrows. Jennifer Aniston knew that this was her boyfriend's action when he was happy. She curiously came over, but didn't hear what Jeffrey Hansen said on the phone. Eric nodded and said a few words in agreement. He hung up the phone and hugged Jennifer Aniston in his arms and spun a few times. Haha, Eric. I'm a little dizzy. Put me down. What's the good news? Eric put Jennifer Aniston back on the sofa and said, Jeffrey happened to meet a friend of his from Columbia Pictures this morning. He talked about Home Alone, and his friend was very interested in this movie. Jeffrey said that if I didn't sign a contract with 20th Century Fox, I could try it. Columbia Pictures? That's the one. Jennifer Aniston made a Statue of Liberty pose. Yes, that's the one. Eric nodded. Amy is my wife's good friend. She's very capable. She's only in her early 30s and is already a senior executive at Columbia Pictures. She helped my wife get investment and distribution for 2 of her movies. I bumped into her yesterday and we happened to talk about you. She seemed to know you, so I told her about Home Alone. In a coffee shop, Jeffrey Hansen explained what happened. Eric, who was sitting across from him, asked curiously, Amy, you said the other party is a woman? Of course. Eric thought that it couldn't be such a coincidence. Then he thought about Columbia Pictures and couldn't help but ask, what's Amy's full name? Amy Pascal. Sure enough, it was her. Perhaps in the 1990s, Shirley Lansing, the first female leader of Hollywood who had brought Paramount from the bottom to the top, had more exposure, but Amy Pascal's achievements were not much worse than Shirley Lansing's. This strong woman had ruled Columbia Pictures for a longer period of time than Shirley Lansing. Eric chatted with Jeffrey for a while. When they were 2 minutes away from the agreed time, Amy Pascal hurried over. She was 1.6 meters tall and wore a black suit. She had long brown hair and delicate facial features. She was very elegant. After greeting each other, the 3 of them sat down together. Qi.com welcomes readers to visit and read our latest, fastest, and hottest serialized works on Qi Originals. Chapter 22. Amy Pascal directly expressed her interest in Eric. Oh, Eric, you're younger than I thought. When I was your age, I had just entered university. You look very young too, Ms. Pascal, Eric complimented. Amy Pascal smiled. Thank you, Eric. Just call me Amy. I really like Jurassic Park. I want to ask, do you still have the film rights to Jurassic Park? Eric raised his eyebrows. Of course. During this period of time, Jurassic Park had become more and more famous. Many film companies had contacted about the film rights, but Eric rejected all of them. Before he had enough power to fight for a considerable amount of benefits for himself, Eric did not plan to sell the rights to Jurassic Park. Then, would you be willing to sell the rights to Jurassic Park to Columbia? We'll give you a good price. Eric said, Amy, that's not what we're talking about today. Also, the special effects technology is not mature yet. I don't plan to sell the rights to Jurassic Park for the time being. That's a pity. Well, let's talk about Home Alone. Jeffrey praised this film. From what I know about Jeffrey, he has a good eye. By the way, I heard that you wanted to let 20th Century Fox distribute this film. What happened? Eric shrugged and told the truth. 20th Century Fox's distribution director, Mr. Caltahunter, refused without even watching the film. Caltahunter, I know him. He's a very arrogant guy. Amy Pascal smiled and said, Then, I think we should watch your movie first. Eric nodded. Amy Pascal took Eric and Jeffrey directly to a screening room at the headquarters of Columbia Pictures. After handing the copy to the projectionist, Eric and the other 2 sat on the leather seats. Eric, you don't seem to be looking forward to it. Before the movie started, Amy Pascal happened to see Eric's expression and joked. Eric smiled helplessly. Amy, you know that I was the one who made the movie from beginning to end. I have every single scene in my mind, and I've watched it many times. But I'm sure you won't be disappointed. As the lights in the screening hall dimmed, Amy Pascal nodded and withdrew her gaze. At the same time, a feeling of desperation spread in her heart. It was true that Columbia Pictures lacked good film projects, but how could she fall to the point of not even letting go of a film made by a high school student? Thinking of this, Amy Pascal sighed in the dark. As one of the top executives of Columbia, Amy Pascal knew the situation of Columbia like the back of her hand. The performance of Columbia Pictures in the past 2 years was moderate. If it weren't for the copyright income from the strong film and TV library accumulated over the years, the company would definitely face huge losses. Compared to the thriving Disney and 20th Century Fox, as well as the flourishing Paramount after the Barry Diller era, Columbia was like an old man. After Ghostbusters took second place in the North American box office in 1984, Columbia didn't have a film in the top 10 for 3 consecutive years. If nothing unexpected happened, there wouldn't be a film this year either. For an established movie giant, this was simply a humiliation. Columbia's parent company, Coca-Cola, suffered heavy losses in last year's stock market crash. If Columbia still didn't do well and couldn't bring profits to the parent company, it was likely to be sold. In fact, Japan's Sony consortium had already released the signal to acquire Columbia Pictures. Amy Pascal had done some research on Eric. This boy had just graduated from high school. In just a few months, he published the science fiction novel Jurassic Park and wrote the script, Back to 17, which was picked by 20th Century Fox. He also played the role of the male lead. If it weren't for these halos, perhaps Amy Pascal would be the same as 20th Century Fox's Calta Hunter, who disdained Eric's film. Columbia Pictures had originally received the script of Back to 17, and several of the company's producers were also very interested in this film. However, Eric's additional condition of playing the male lead was unacceptable to Columbia, which was now cautious of investment, and finally had to give up. Hearing that it was Barry Diller who personally approved the plan of Back to 17, Amy Pascal sighed compared to the mediocre Mr. Blunt Cohen, who was now sitting in the position of Columbia's president. The company's current situation couldn't be separated from the president's lack of courage and conservative character. As Home Alone played, the witty plot and Stuart Runkle's mischievous performance quickly pulled Amy Pascal's scattered thoughts to the movie screen. After the movie finished, Amy Pascal was surprised. She couldn't believe that this excellent comedy film was made by the 18-year-old boy in front of her. Amy Pascal stood up with excitement and said to Eric, "Eric, can you wait here for a moment? I'll make a call." From Amy Pascal's expression, Eric knew that if nothing unexpected happened, the matter was already half successful. Half an hour later, 7 or 8 executives of Columbia Pictures, including Columbia's president, Blunt Cohen, gathered in the screening room to watch Home Alone again. After watching the movie in a cheerful atmosphere, it was almost time to get off work, but no one was in a hurry to leave. After more than half of the movie, the executives of Columbia had already begun to discuss with each other. In the president's office of Columbia Pictures, Eric and Jeffrey sat across from Blunt Cohen, who was in his 60s. After the assistant served coffee, Blunt Cohen leisurely sipped a few mouthfuls of coffee before saying, "Eric, to be honest, we are very optimistic about the potential of Home Alone, so we plan to buy all the rights of Home Alone for $10 million. What do you think?" Hearing the price of $10 million, Jeffrey Hansen, who was sitting next to him, suddenly had a joyful expression. The cost of $1 million had increased tenfold in the blink of an eye. If it were him, he would probably nod and agree immediately. Blunt Cohen noticed Jeffrey Hansen's expression and showed a satisfied smile. The company estimated that the box office of this movie would be around $50 million, and this movie could easily be made into a sequel. The potential of the surrounding copyrights was also very high, so after some discussion, they directly decided to buy all the rights of the movie at a price that they thought was relatively high. After the price was set, it was natural to bargain, so the executives of Columbia Pictures had already set a buyout cap of $12 million. "You want to buy out Home Alone for $10 million? Do you think I'm a fool?" Eric complained in his heart, but that was the way of doing business. Raise the price on the spot, then return the money on the spot. "Mr. Cohen, I believe you already have a preliminary estimate of the box office value of Home Alone? Can I know this figure?" Eric did not immediately agree. Blunt Cohen was a little disappointed, but he still said, "Of course, we think that if the marketing is done properly, the box office of Home Alone in North America should be around $30 million. According to the usual practice, as the producer, you can get around 20% of the profit. So, Eric, $10 million is very reasonable. The cost of your production should not exceed $2 million, so Eric, what are you hesitating for? As long as you agree, you will immediately become the youngest multimillionaire. Chapter 23. Jeffrey Hansen, who was sitting next to him, felt that he should help to bargain, but before he could open his mouth, Eric said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Cohen, but I don't intend to sell Home Alone on a buyout basis. Let's talk about a share agreement, shall we?" Blunt Cohen frowned slightly and looked displeased. "Eric, if we're going to split the profits, I can only give you 18%. Mr. Cohen, didn't you just say 20%? Jeffrey retorted. Blunt Cohen said calmly, "What I just said was under an average situation. If we were to release Home Alone, the publicity cost would definitely be much higher than the production cost. 18% is already very reasonable." Jeffrey was about to argue, but Eric blocked the somewhat impulsive Jeffrey and said, "All right, Mr. Cohen, but I have another plan. How about we sign an VAM agreement?" Although VAM agreements were very common in the film industry, Blunt Cohen still sneered in his heart. He thought to himself, what qualifications do you have to sign an VAM agreement with Columbia? However, he still motioned with interest for Eric to continue. He wanted to hear what kind of VAM conditions this little guy could come up with. Eric acted as if he didn't see the undisguised mockery on Blunt Cohen's face. He said with a smile, $50 million as the bottom line. Under the premise that Columbia guarantees the publicity and the number of screenings, if the box office of Home Alone is lower than $50 million, I will give all the copyright of Home Alone to Columbia Pictures for free. After these words were said, even Blunt Cohen, who was used to seeing storms, was a little moved. They estimated that the box office of Home Alone would be around $50 million. If they really signed the VAM agreement, it would be very easy to control the box office of the movie within $50 million with some small moves. Blunt Cohen felt that Eric was stupid, but he couldn't help but admire this young man's courage. Jeffrey Hansen suddenly stood up and said to Eric in disbelief, "Eric, are you crazy?" Eric stood up and patted Jeffrey's shoulder, motioning for him to sit down. He continued, "If the box office is within $50 million to $100 million, I want 20% of it. If the box office exceeds $100 million, then for every $10 million increase in box office, my share will increase by 1%. After Eric finished speaking, he didn't say anything else. He picked up his coffee and calmly drank it. At the side, Jeffrey Hansen was restlessly glancing back and forth between the two men. He was a little worried that Blunt Cohen would agree to Eric's ridiculous agreement. If that happened, the $10 million buyout fee would be gone. $10 million. Most people would never see that much money in their entire lives. Unfortunately, Blunt Cohen was indeed a person in power who lacked courage. After hesitating for a full 5 minutes, he finally said, "Eric, I need to have a meeting to discuss this matter. Can I give you an answer tomorrow?" Eric nodded and stood up to say goodbye to Blunt Cohen. When they arrived at the parking lot, Jeffrey didn't go to his car. Instead, he got into Eric's passenger seat. "Eric, you're too impulsive. $10 million is gone in the blink of an eye. Look at the past few years. Although comedy movies generally achieve good box office results, dark horses are few and far between. Let's just choose the buyout agreement tomorrow. Maybe we can fight for the price? Listen to me, young man. Sometimes people only have 1 or 2 opportunities in their lifetime. If you miss it, you'll never get another. With $10 million, you can continue to make movies and do a lot of things." At this time, Eric was immersed in the pleasure of digging a hole for Columbia Pictures. The blood in his body seemed to be boiling slightly. In his previous life, the kid's box office was recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records. Now, this copy of The Kid's Home was just as good as it was in his previous life. He didn't believe that with the distribution ability of an established giant like Columbia, the box office of The Kid's Home would be much worse than it was in his previous life. Therefore, at first, he didn't know how to fight for the greatest benefits for himself. According to the normal negotiations, his small-budget movie could only get a 20% cut of the box office at most. When Blunt Cohen heard that Eric wanted to sign the agreement, he stingily reduced the 20% cut to 18%. Then, Eric had a flash of inspiration and thought of a way to make the cut fluctuate: a bet. In the film industry, betting on the box office was very common. Usually, it was a win-win situation. Both sides could avoid the risk and fight for the greatest benefits for themselves. If the final North American box office of The Kid's Home was $280 million USD, after signing the agreement, Eric would get a 38% cut, which was higher than the 35% cut of those powerful producers. Moreover, according to Blunt Cohen's reaction after hearing his proposal, Columbia Pictures was ready to jump into the hole. "Hey, Eric, I've said so much. Are you even listening to me?" Jeffrey Hansen found that his mouth was dry from talking, and Eric was sitting in his seat absent-mindedly. After gently patting Eric's shoulder twice, Eric finally reacted. "Okay, Jeffrey, I know you're good to me, but think about it. A few months ago, I had nothing. So what if I gave it a shot? I'll tell you a secret. I think that The Kid's Home's box office is very likely to break 200 million. Think about it, according to the agreement I proposed, how much of the cut would I get?" Jeffrey stared at Eric as if he was looking at a delusional patient. Eric smiled. "Jeffrey, have some faith in me, okay? If it really succeeds, as a nominal producer, I'll definitely give you a generous bonus. You can redeem Firefly Films from the bank. So, how about you do me a favor?" Jeffrey dreamed of redeeming the film company that he and his wife founded together, but he didn't take Eric's words seriously. Seeing that he couldn't persuade Eric to change his mind, he could only ask, "Okay, Eric, what do you need me to do?" "Help me contact a law firm and an accounting firm. If nothing goes wrong, Columbia will definitely agree to the agreement I proposed. At that time, I'll need someone to help me monitor and audit the implementation of the agreement. If there's a dispute, someone will also help me fight a lawsuit." Jeffrey said, "That's not a problem, but Eric, do you still have money now? Even if you just hire 2 teams like this, it will cost a lot of money." Of course. Eric opened the glove compartment in front of the car and took out a Jurassic Park novel. "I'll use the subsequent royalties and movie rights of Jurassic Park as collateral. With the current sales of Jurassic Park, these 2 things are worth at least $1 million. If the bet really fails, I'll use Jurassic Park as collateral. I believe those firms won't refuse." "Eric, you're really crazy. All great geniuses have crazy attributes." Jeffrey spread his hands. "Okay, you're not only crazy but also arrogant. Even Aristotle can't stop you. Aristotle is very busy. Stendhal said that." Jeffrey finally agreed to help contact the firms as soon as possible. At the same time, in the conference room of Columbia Pictures, several executives were discussing the conditions of the bet proposed by Eric. "Okay, that's about it. Everyone, please express your opinions." Blunt Cohen described the conditions of the bet proposed by Eric and looked at the executives below, waiting for them to express their opinions. After Blunt Cohen finished speaking, most of the executives in the conference room were in disbelief. Should they say that the boy was crazy or stupid? In the end, an executive from the distribution department, Lester Reed, took the lead and said, "Mr. Cohen, this is a good opportunity. Accept it. According to our estimation, the box office potential of this movie is at most $50 million. After signing the bet agreement, it's easy to limit the box office to $50 million. Moreover, we don't even need to pay the buyout fee of $10 million. After Lester Reed finished speaking, the others followed suit. Chi Dien. Com welcomes readers to visit and read our latest, fastest, and hottest serialized works on Chi Dien Originals. Chapter 24. Amy Pascal, who was sitting at the end of the conference table, felt that this matter was not as simple as she had imagined. Although she had only interacted with Eric for a few hours, she had sensed that this boy had a calmness that was hard to match among his peers. A person with this kind of character would definitely not be hot-headed and propose such an VAM agreement with a low chance of winning. Therefore, this VAM agreement was most likely made by Eric Williams after careful consideration. Amy Pascal ignored the overwhelming support of the VAM agreement. After thinking for a long time, she said, "Mr. Cohen, I think it's better to be cautious. There's no such thing as a free lunch. We can slightly raise the buyout price and negotiate with Eric Williams. If it doesn't work out, we can sign a share agreement. Anyway, with the box office potential of this movie, we can definitely make a fortune." "Amy, I think you're too conservative. You're worse than that kid." Lester Reed, who had spoken first, retorted, "Do you know the potential of this movie? If we completely obtain the copyright of this movie, in addition to the box office share, we can make at least tens of millions of dollars in profit from the video copyright, TV broadcast, and other peripheral licensing. Not to mention, we can also film a sequel. If we choose a share agreement, the copyright will still be in the hands of that boy. We will have to give him a large share of the profits in the next operation." Amy Pascal said, "We can also raise the buyout price. Maybe $15 million. That boy will definitely agree." Based on the potential of this kind of low-budget comedy, $50 million is usually considered a box office dark horse. Most of the good quality ones can only get $20 million at the box office. So, why should we pay $10 million when there's more than an 80% chance of getting the full copyright of this movie for free? That boy can propose such a crazy VAM agreement with less than a 20% chance of winning. Don't tell me we don't even have the guts to make this bet? But Amy Pascal looked at the greed and fanaticism in her colleague's eyes. Her feminine sixth sense made her feel that this matter was even more inappropriate. "Okay, Amy," Blunt Cohen interrupted Amy Pascal's speech and said, "Although Jeffrey Hansen and Eric Williams may be your friends, you must understand that you are now an employee of Columbia and must consider the interests of the company." Blunt Cohen's words stunned Amy Pascal. She was indeed friends with Jeffrey Hansen, but as a professional manager, she had always abided by her professional ethics. But now, just because he expressed his opinion out of caution, he was suspected of being a traitor and helping outsiders fight for benefits. The strong sense of humiliation made Amy Pascal's right hand, which was holding the pen, tremble slightly. Finally, Amy Pascal stood up abruptly and said coldly, "Mr. Cohen, since you have such thoughts, I think I'm no longer suitable to participate in this project. I'll take my leave first. Goodbye." After that, Amy Pascal pursed her lips and hurriedly organized the documents in front of her. She then silently turned around and left the office. The entire office fell into a brief silence. A woman. No one knew who was the first to sigh. As a woman, Amy Pascal held a high position. In a patriarchal society, she would definitely be discriminated against in all kinds of ways. However, no one knew what kind of emotion was contained in this sigh. Blunt Cohen slightly regretted what he had just said. Amy Pascal's workability and professional ethics were obvious to all. Otherwise, she wouldn't be sitting in this office as a woman. However, although Blunt Cohen lacked boldness when it came to managing the company, he was very headstrong and self-opinionated. He felt that although his words were somewhat abrupt, Amy Pascal's departure from the conference room was also a provocation to his authority. Thus, he very naturally placed all the blame on Amy Pascal. The office was silent for more than 10 seconds before Blunt Cohen said, "Okay, since everyone has agreed to this VAM agreement, let's call it a day. Lester, from tomorrow onwards, you will be in charge of the Home Alone project." Under everyone's envious gazes, Lester Reed excitedly agreed. If he won the VAM, this credit would definitely be given to him. In the future, it would be a matter of course for him to be promoted and get a raise. "No problem, Mr. Cohen. I will try my best to complete this matter." The next day, Eric received a notice from Columbia that the VAM had been accepted. At the same time, Jeffrey also contacted the law firm that Eric needed. After the two law firms evaluated the value of Jurassic Park, they agreed to send a team to assist Eric in drafting and supervising the implementation of the VAM agreement. On October 31st, although he was very interested, Eric still couldn't participate in the first Halloween parade since his rebirth. Instead, He stayed in the conference room of the Columbia headquarters with a bunch of boring middle-aged men and women to draft the specific content of the VAM agreement. On the basis of Eric's conditions, the specific content of the agreement was gradually refined. In order to ensure that Columbia did its best to promote and distribute Home Alone, the agreement even listed details such as the number of promotional articles published in different reputable newspapers, the number of screens to be increased or decreased depending on the theater attendance, the number of screenings and showtimes in the cinemas, and so on. Once Columbia violated the agreement, there would be different punishment measures based on the degree of violation. When the last dozens of pages of the contract were drafted, Eric himself was stunned. He couldn't help but admire the professionalism of the accounting and lawyer team that Jeffrey Hansen found. On the Columbia side, Lester Reed, who was in charge of the Home Alone project, thought that Home Alone was basically in the bag. Therefore, he didn't pay much attention to the contract, which was dozens of pages long. Instead, he laughed at Eric for making a fuss over nothing. The two teams that were hired by the other party were estimated to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. What a waste! Lester Reed felt that even though the contract was detailed, the box office potential of Home Alone was there. Columbia's management's boldest estimate for the box office of Home Alone was not higher than Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was currently ranked first in the box office of the year. This movie, which was a perfect combination of animation and live action, only had a box office of $150 million in North America. Columbia's original plan was to release Home Alone in December during the Christmas season, but Eric firmly opposed it. No one knew better than him the tragic situation of the high box office movies in December. Within a month, 3 of the top 10 box office movies of the year occupied the box office of the year. In his previous life, Home Alone had been released in November and had a long run of more than 2 months to achieve such an amazing box office. In the end, Columbia compromised and decided to release Home Alone on November 18th, the same day as Back to 17. This was also proposed by Eric. Because of the difference in theme and audience, the two movies related to him would not squeeze the other's box office. Instead, they would promote each other's box office. For this reason, Columbia even postponed the drama film New Horse, which was originally planned to be released on November 18th, to free up about 1,000 screens for Home Alone. Columbia's ambivalence could be seen from the number of screens. Under normal circumstances, only movies with high box office ratings would be released in more than 1,000 theaters. Therefore, this number showed that Columbia was optimistic about the box office of Home Alone. But at the same time, because of the VAM agreement, Columbia did not want Home Alone to exceed $50 million. This way, not only could they monopolize all the box office shares of Home Alone, but they could also get all the copyright of Home Alone, including the sequel. Therefore, the number of screens did not exceed 1,000. Eric was not dissatisfied with this. It was normal for Columbia's top management to have such a mentality. Moreover, in the VAM agreement, which was dozens of pages long, it clearly stated that if the box office reached a certain number, the corresponding number of screens would be increased. If Columbia refused to comply, then they would have to wait for a lawsuit. Eric believed that the revenue of just one movie was not enough to make a giant like Columbia lose their business reputation. After the VAM agreement was signed, because both parties did not intend to hide the agreement, and instead hoped that the agreement would spread, the content of the agreement quickly spread throughout Hollywood. With the help of the publicity department of Columbia Pictures, the next day, the headline of the entertainment section of the Los Angeles Times published an article about the bet. Genius young man versus gambling giant Columbia. Crazy or stupid? Chi Dien. Com welcomes readers to visit and read our latest, fastest, and hottest serialized works on Chi Dien Originals. Chapter 25. Yesterday, a shocking VAM agreement was signed at the headquarters of Columbia Pictures. The two sides of the VAM are the genius Eric Williams, who recently rose to fame with Jurassic Park and Back to 17, and the Columbia TriStar Pictures Group. It is reported that after Eric Williams finished filming Back to 17, he used the salary of Back to 17 and the advance of Jurassic Park royalties to write and direct a 100-minute short-budget comedy, Home Alone, in just 15 days. Not to mention the quality of the movie, just the fact that Eric Williams was able to accomplish this feat at the age of 18 is worthy of the title of genius. After some twists and turns, Home Alone was finally unanimously favored by the Columbia executives. According to insiders, the president of Columbia, Mr. Blunt Cohen, offered $10 million to buy the copyright of Home Alone. However, Eric Williams rejected the attractive offer that was enough to make him the youngest multimillionaire in Hollywood. Instead, he proposed a crazy and stupid VAM agreement. The article then described the contents of the VAM in detail, and then analyzed the possibility of Eric winning the VAM agreement. The author of the article was obviously an insider. He listed the box office data of a series of similar comedy movies, combined with the information revealed by Home Alone. He came to a pessimistic conclusion that the possibility of Eric Williams losing the VAM agreement was more than 80%. Because Home Alone had neither actors with box office appeal, nor was it a big investment production. Generally, for this type of comedy, if the quality was good, only a few could get 20 to 30 million at the box office. Most of them only got a few million at the box office. Therefore, the possibility of Home Alone breaking $50 million was very low. And the author concluded with a conspiracy theory that Columbia would not allow the box office of Home Alone to exceed $50 million. What did people like to talk about the most? One was a genius who had surpassed them so much that they had no feelings of jealousy, the other was a tragic hero, and the other was a conspiracy theory. The article in the Los Angeles Times more or less combined these three factors. For a moment, public sentiment was surging. Originally, due to Fox's early publicity for Back to 17, the public had already become interested in Eric. This could be seen from the steadily increasing sales of Jurassic Park. Now that the bomb of A Kid in Charge had exploded, the public's interest in Eric had reached its peak. The public's interest meant sales and viewership ratings. Soon, Eric received more than 10 interview requests within a few days. Jeff, who hadn't been in touch with him for a while, suddenly called and said that someone was inquiring about him at their restaurant. Eric keenly felt that the paparazzi had begun to pay attention to him. At the same time, after the article in the Los Angeles Times was published, Fox and Columbia tacitly worked together to promote Back to 17 and Home Alone. Although Calta-Hunt, the head of distribution at Fox, regretted that he had hastily rejected Eric's Home Alone without even watching the movie, his professionalism as a professional manager made him quickly forget this emotion. After negotiating with the top management at Columbia, the publicity plan for Back to 17 was revised. The effect of the two giants working together could be imagined. "And how's the situation? Can I go home?" Eric, who was hiding in Jennifer Aniston's den, saw Jennifer Aniston open the door and ask. He hadn't been home for a week. Jennifer Aniston shook her head, put the convenience bag in her hand on the coffee table, and said, "I drove past your house and found at least 7 or 8 paparazzi waiting near your house. Fortunately, they didn't know that I was driving your car. Otherwise, they would have definitely followed. It's too scary." Eric sighed at the insanity of the paparazzi. Because of the two giants' vigorous promotion of Home Alone and Back to 17, Eric had become a hot topic in North America in just a week. Even the British newspapers on the other side of the Atlantic had information about Eric. After all, Eric was an insider in his previous life. After receiving Jeff's call, he saw that the situation was not right and directly hid in Jennifer Aniston's den. The two major film companies had promoted his movie enough. The next step was to rely on the quality of the movie itself. Therefore, Eric was too lazy to go out and provide topics for the paparazzi. What's more, these paparazzi might write some nonsense. Although Eric had hidden himself in time, he was still completely invisible in front of the public. The paparazzi couldn't interview him, so they dug up all of his experiences from childhood to adulthood. English immigrants, high school transcripts, working in Jeff's Italian restaurant. Aniston read with great interest and commented from time to time. Until a few days later, a gossip tabloid published the love triangle between him, the genius child star Drew, and an unknown actress. The author of the article obviously got the inside information from the cast of Back to 17, so the story in the newspaper was vivid, as if the author had seen it with his own eyes. He even inferred that the reason why Drew Barrymore quit drug was because of Eric, which was infinitely close to the truth. Because of this article, an unknown actress made Eric sleep on the sofa for 2 days out of jealousy. Michael Krause was very excited recently. Because of the two major film companies' intense promotion of the two movies and Eric, the sales of Jurassic Park, which had exceeded 100,000 copies a week, skyrocketed again. In the second week of November, Jurassic Park finally reached the top of the New York Times North American bestseller list with 250,000 copies sold. According to the current sales trend, it wouldn't be a problem to exceed 1 million copies within the year. After calling Eric's home many times to no avail, Michael Krause learned about Eric's whereabouts through Penny Marshall and went directly to Jennifer Aniston's place. "Hey, Michael, how did you find this place?" Eric asked curiously as he invited Michael Krause into the house. "If I didn't find you, I would have called the police. You were hiding here." Michael Krause was about to say something when he saw Jennifer Aniston walking out of the bedroom in her pajamas. He closed his mouth in surprise. "Michael, this is my girlfriend, Jennifer Aniston. And this is Mr. Michael Krause, the manager of my novel publishing house." Michael and Jennifer Aniston greeted each other, and Jennifer Aniston walked to the bathroom. "Hey, Eric, is this the little actress? I still like Drew more. She was so cute in E.T." As soon as Jennifer Aniston disappeared, Michael couldn't help but gossip. Eric poured a cup of coffee for Michael and whispered, "Michael, if you want to be kicked out by Anne, let's continue this topic. Even I don't dare to mention Drew's name now." Michael Krause clearly felt that Eric wasn't joking, so he decisively changed the topic. "Well, Eric, Jurassic Park is selling so well now. Don't you think you should continue to write a sequel?" Eric shook his head without hesitation. The film and television rights of Jurassic Park were already in his hands. Although they were mortgaged to the two firms in charge of the VAM, he wasn't worried. At the same time, he didn't want to waste time writing a sequel. "The novel is already a complete story. I don't think there's anything else to write, Michael." Michael Krause wasn't discouraged. He continued, "So, do you have any other works now?" Eric shook his head again. He was so busy some time ago that he finally finished Home Alone and signed the VAM agreement with Columbia. Eric directly gave himself a vacation. And he couldn't rest for a few days. A week before the movie was released, Eric had to follow the crew around to promote the movie. Fortunately, the two companies had reached a cooperation agreement, and the progress of the tour was basically the same. Eric didn't have to split himself into two halves, one on the East Coast and the other on the West Coast. Chapter 26. Michael Krause saw that Eric kept shaking his head. Finally, he said shamelessly, "Eric, just write something. You can't let me come here for nothing, right? I've been busy with Jurassic Park recently. Even my wife has started to complain that I only care about work. Also, you wanted an advance on royalties for the movie, and I gave you 200,000 renminbi without hesitation. Don't tell me you're not touched at all?" Eric couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine when he saw a short and stout middle-aged man trying to play the emotional card. He thought for a moment and said, "Okay, Michael, I have a good theme. It's also a science fiction, but it's only a rough idea. There's no specific outline. The story is inspired by George Romero's Living Dead movies. It's about a biological company that was researching a virus that leaked, causing humans to be infected and become the living dead." Eric roughly told the story of Resident Evil. He had watched the Resident Evil movies in his previous life. Although he didn't really like them, because of his abnormal memory after his rebirth, he was able to completely retell the story. In his previous life, the Resident Evil series was considered the most profitable movie adaptation of a game. The production cost wasn't high, but the series box office grossed more than $1 billion. Since Michael Krause wanted him to write something, then he might as well take this opportunity. In his previous life, although Eric wasn't a nationalistic youth, taking advantage of Japanese people gave him a sense of accomplishment. Michael Krause was somewhat dissatisfied, isn't this story too niche? Eric, there are indeed a lot of people who like zombie culture, but the target audience is still too small. Why don't you change it to something else? Eric shrugged and spread out his hands, looking like it was up to him to take it or leave it. Michael Klaus had no choice but to agree. All right, write the story as soon as possible. With your current fame, you don't have to worry about sales. All right, you can add some adult elements in it. You must make it more explosive. Anyway, you're an adult now, so no one will blame you. Just as he was rambling on about his suggestion, Michael Klaus suddenly noticed the unnatural expression on Eric's face. He subconsciously turned around, only to find Aniston standing behind him with her hands on her hips. She was pouting slightly, as if she was asking him to continue. Eric, I suddenly remembered that I still have some things to do. That's all. Goodbye. Michael awkwardly picked up his bag and was about to slip away when he was caught trying to persuade her boyfriend to write an erotic novel. After opening the door, he couldn't help but turn around and say, "You have to write it as soon as possible." After Michael Klaus left, Jennifer Aniston asked, "Eric, are you really going to write according to what that guy said?" "Of course not. I've been promoted by Columbia and Fox as a role model for America's youth. How could I ruin my glorious image for a little profit?" After a period of promotion, The Kid and Back to 17 finally ushered in another critical moment, the movie test screening. On November 11th, the two movies held a test screening for film critics at the same time. In this era, there was no online hype. The promotion of movies was mainly through newspapers. The audience basically relied on the reviews of the movies in the newspapers. Therefore, film critics were a barrier that couldn't be bypassed in the promotion process. Of course, after the film critics who attended the test screening watched the movie, as long as the quality of the movie wasn't terrible, they generally wouldn't make too harsh a comment. After all, film critics needed movies, but movies didn't necessarily need film critics. If they overdid it, the movie company would ban them. The day after the test screening, the long-awaited reviews of The Kid and Back to 17 appeared one after another in major newspapers and magazines. The Kid has created a completely new style of pure comedy narration. It is full of laughter and warmth from childhood and growing up. The conflict between the eccentric protagonist and the two stupid thieves is suitable for both young and old. It has to be said that the 7-year-old actor Stuart Runkle's performance in the movie can be described as simply stunning. And the newcomer Matthew Perry's performance as Marvin is also remarkable. As long as that comedic face appears, people can't help but laugh. Los Angeles Times, the genius director and the talented young actors have given the audience a Christmas feast that will last until the end of the day. I advise the audience not to eat popcorn while watching the movie, or else you might laugh and spit it into the neck of the audience in front of you. Chicago Tribune, Back to 17, is Drew Barrymore's transformation. Drew completely got rid of the cute little girl image in E.T., and played the role of a rebellious daughter about to graduate from high school. In the movie, Drew's several emotional outbursts are amazing. Dan Aykroyd and Susan Sarandon, the two superstars' performances are still outstanding. It has to be said that as the screenwriter and lead actor, Eric Williams' performance in the movie is completely unlike that of a newcomer with no acting experience. He doesn't fall behind in the process of competing with Drew Barrymore. Moreover, he is the director of The Kid that was released at the same time. It has to be said that this is a genius who has been kissed by God. Otherwise, there is no way to explain why Eric Williams is so outstanding. Empire magazine. Many people always complain that reality is not as they wish. After watching Back to 17, you will find that it is not that you are not happy, but that all kinds of negative emotions have completely shrouded you and isolated you from the happiness you have. But only the protagonist in the movie is lucky enough to break away from his original body and look at himself from another perspective. HSD post: there were many newspapers that praised the two movies, but at the same time, some criticism was inevitable. After all, no matter how powerful the two media groups were, it was impossible to control all the public opinion. What's more, the other 4 film companies would certainly not let Columbia and Fox be too complacent. The Chicago Sun newspaper directly criticized Home Alone as a ridiculous work that was completely detached from reality. The plot lacked rationality, and the teasing of the two stupid thieves was impossible in reality. Therefore, it was likely to lead the wrong children to the wrong direction. Another newspaper, the Los Angeles Current, put forward an even sharper point. The newspaper made a fuss about the scene where Kevin held a toy gun in The Kid, and called for the censors to re-examine the rating of the movie. This news even attracted the attention of a TV station in Los Angeles. Eric was a little worried when he heard about this. In his impression, although guns were rampant in the United States, there were very strict restrictions on minors holding guns in movies and TV shows. He anxiously called the person in charge of The Kid, Lester Reed, to ask about this. Lester did not care to reassure him and revealed a little inside information. The owner of the Los Angeles Times was a shareholder of Universal Pictures. Universal Pictures had an animated film, Walking the World with Little Feet, that would be released on November 18th. As a competitor for children like Home Alone, it was normal for Columbia to do something like this. Columbia would also counterattack. Putting down the phone, Eric sighed. He had fallen into mutual deception so quickly. At the same time, this episode gave him a sense of crisis. Now, compared to those movie giants, he was just an inconspicuous shrimp and posed no threat to them. However, once Home Alone was released and became a success like it did in his previous life, then his existence would definitely arouse the vigilance of those movie giants, especially Columbia, which was about to be ruthlessly screwed over. If he did not have enough power and did not want to give up the majority of the profits, then what awaited him would be the unrelenting suppression of the movie giants. Tom Cruise in Viacom's previous life was an example. As the movies starring Tom Cruise sold well, he demanded more and more power and profit. Finally, when Tom Cruise earned more money from a movie than his employer, Paramount Pictures, the owner of Paramount, Summer Leishadong, publicly fell out with Tom Cruise in the newspapers. At the same time, the media under Viacom's banner began to smear Tom Cruise's name for several years, directly causing Tom Cruise's career to hit rock bottom. "Hey, dear, what are you thinking about? Why do you look so sad?" Noticing that Eric had been standing by the phone in a daze, Jennifer Aniston gently pulled on Eric's shirt. "Oh, nothing." Although Eric always looked confident, Jennifer Aniston still felt that he was worried about the box office of the two movies. After all, Eric only had the car left by his father. Everything else was mortgaged. If he lost the bet on The Kid, Eric would directly go bankrupt. Hugging her boyfriend's waist from behind and pressing her face against Eric's back, Jennifer Aniston said softly, "Dear, if you have something on your mind, just talk to me. Although I can't help much, I can still be a qualified listener. I just suddenly feel." Eric turned around and hugged Jennifer Aniston tightly in his arms. "The road ahead may be difficult. And, will you always be with me?" "Of course I will." Jennifer Aniston didn't understand the deeper meaning of Eric's words, but she decisively chose to answer in the affirmative. "Thank you, and so, are you really not going to New York with me? I'll discuss it with James. It's just a ticket." The release date of The Kid and Back to 17 was getting closer and closer. The two crews also had to go to New York on the East Coast for promotion. However, as a dispensable supporting role in Back to 17, Jennifer Aniston was not among the actors participating in the promotion. Not wanting her boyfriend to worry about this small matter, Jennifer Aniston shook her head and said, "No, I lived in New York for many years. It's nothing new." The two whispered for a while before Jennifer Aniston pushed Eric away and turned to pack Eric's luggage. Chapter 27. On November 18th, the second day after Eric flew to New York, Home Alone and Back to 17 officially welcomed their premieres. The opening screen for Home Alone was 1,000 yuan, while the opening screen for Back to 17 was 1,279 yuan, which was more than 200 yuan more than Home Alone. Fox didn't care about the VAM, so they went all out from the beginning. At the same time, Universal Pictures Animation, Walking the World with Little Feet, was released on 1395 screens, and Disney's Bo Wei International's animation, The Adventures of Oliva, was released on 952 screens. With three children's movies being released at the same time, the media felt that Eric's chances of winning the VAM were even lower. However, Eric wasn't too worried. These two animations might be able to squeeze Home Alone's box office in the early stages, but they definitely wouldn't be able to last as long as Home Alone. In his previous life, Home Alone had grossed more than $10 million in the box office for 10 consecutive weeks. After attending the two premieres, it was already past 11 p.m. when Eric and the crew returned to the hotel. This era didn't have the advanced box office statistics system of the future, so they could only wait until next week to know the box office statistics of Home Alone and Back to 17. After returning to his room, Eric took a shower and was about to go to bed when the phone suddenly rang. Only Jennifer Aniston would be calling at this time of the night. "Hi, Eric, are you asleep?" Jennifer Aniston asked with a little excitement in her voice. Eric sat on the bed and wiped his wet hair with a towel. "Not yet, I just took a shower." "And, did something happy happen?" "Take a guess." Eric teased. "Oh, I know, you must be pregnant." "Don't worry, I'll take responsibility." "Bah, you big pervert, you only know how to think about those dirty things." Jennifer Aniston spat into the phone. "I just went to watch Home Alone and encountered something very interesting." Eric smiled. "Tell me about it." "It's like this. When I came out of the cinema, I happened to see a 5- or 6-year-old boy. He was yelling that he wanted to see Kevin. That child's parents didn't agree and said that they had just seen it. In the end, the little boy lay on the ground and started crying. Someone saw this scene and mistakenly thought that the parents were human traffickers. They beat up the poor young parents and called the police. In the end, several police cars came. It was so funny, haha." Jennifer Aniston only told Eric this story as an interesting anecdote during the movie, but Eric saw more meaning in it. After chatting with Jennifer Aniston for a while longer, Eric hung up the phone and lay on the bed, feeling a little excited. Because things still happened according to the trajectory of his previous life. In his previous life, the reason why Home Alone was able to achieve such a shocking box office was because a large number of naughty kids were clamoring to watch Home Alone over and over again. They also competed to imitate Kevin's every move in the movie, which ultimately pushed the movie to achieve such a shocking box office result. Things were just as Eric had guessed. On the first day of the movie's release, Home Alone and the other two animated movies' box office sales were about the same. However, as the word of mouth of Home Alone spread at an amazing speed among children, the box office sales of Home Alone doubled on the second day. On the third day, the box office sales increased again, and there were already queues in front of some of the popular cinemas. After all, animated movies could be watched at any time, but the mischievous Kevin was not someone that could be seen at any time. Most children dreamed of growing up quickly and being able to do many things that they couldn't do now. From the perspective of children, Home Alone realized what most children wanted to do in reality but couldn't do, didn't dare to do, or couldn't do. Among the children in North America, a trend of imitating Kevin quickly swept up. A San Francisco newspaper even reported a real Home Alone incident. After a 9-year-old boy watched Home Alone, he secretly locked himself in his room when the family was preparing to go to Hawaii for a vacation. The parents who had 6 children didn't notice this incident. After the family flew to Hawaii, they found that the boy was missing. The boy's parents had to give up their vacation and fly back to San Francisco from Hawaii. At the same time, the boy had already made a mess at home, waiting for the arrival of the stupid thief. Unfortunately, what they waited for was his anxious parents. A week later, the box office for the first week of the movie was finally calculated. Although the previous signs of popularity had made people mentally prepared, the kid's astonishing $27.55 million box office for the first week still shocked everyone. A box office of more than $20 million might not be comparable to blockbusters in the future that broke $100 million in the first week. But in this era, this result directly beat all the high box office movies in recent years. Even Spielberg's E.T. did not have such an amazing opening. Only George Lucas' Star Wars series could surpass the kids' Home Alone, but the production cost of Star Wars was more than 100 times that of the kids. At the same time, Back to 17 also took second place with a good score of $13.12 million. The two animated films that competed with the kid, Walking the World with Tiny Feet and The Adventures of Oliva, only received 7.12 million and 3.98 million at the box office respectively, which was far below the expectations of the two major studios. There was no doubt that the box office of the two animated films was badly suppressed by The Kid. While the executives of Universal and Disney lamented that The Kid's box office was too heaven-defying, they also envied Columbia's good luck. Columbia's luck was indeed good, but Columbia President Blunt Cohen was in a bad mood when he saw the first-week box office. He even couldn't help but throw the teacup in his hand several times. According to the first-week box office data, Columbia's reevaluation concluded that the North American box office of Home Alone was definitely more than $200 million, and it was even likely to exceed $300 million. Blunt Cohen was extremely regretful. If he had insisted on buying the copyright of Home Alone, instead of signing some bullshit TVAM agreement, Columbia would have made hundreds of millions of dollars in profit from this movie this year. Now, according to the VAM agreement, if the box office of Home Alone was $300 million, Columbia would pay $120 million to Eric, and would only get $45 million. After deducting the distribution cost, Columbia's profit would only be a fraction of Eric's $120 million. Blunt Cohen had thought of tearing up the agreement many times, but the contents of the VAM agreement were now known by the whole country. If he rashly tore up the agreement, not only would it be difficult for Columbia to win the lawsuit, but it would also become a laughingstock in the whole country. As the president, he would definitely be kicked out as a scapegoat. No, I have to find a way to recover the loss, I have to. Blunt Cohen was muttering to himself when his assistant knocked on the door and came in. Mr. Cohen, everyone is here. We can start the meeting. Blunt Cohen rubbed his temples and got up to walk to the conference room. After sitting down in his seat, Blunt Cohen directly asked Lester Reed, who was in charge of the Home Alone project, "Lester, how's the analysis of the data?" Lester Reed was supposed to come back late at night with the crew of Home Alone, but an emergency call from the headquarters made him return to Los Angeles half a day earlier than the others. After arriving at the Columbia headquarters and learning about the box office of Home Alone, Lester instinctively felt that something was wrong. He looked guiltily at the expressionless Blunt Cohen. It was Blunt Cohen who decided to accept the VAM agreement, but he was the one who first responded to the agreement at the original meeting. According to Blunt Cohen's headstrong character, he would most likely vent his anger on Lester. "Mr. Cohen, according to the analysis of the data department, according to the VAM agreement, we can only get about $50 million at most. The peak of the share is about $225 million. This is the data curve." Blunt Cohen took the analysis document and glanced at the red parabola representing Columbia's profit and the green curve representing Eric's share. His temples couldn't help but twitch twice again. Bang! Another teacup was thrown on the mahogany floor by Blunt Cohen, making a muffled sound. Everyone in the conference room was slightly shocked. They subconsciously lowered their heads and became silent. Under normal circumstances, a $50 million box office share was enough to wake up many film company executives from their dreams. After all, even for the Big Six, the best annual box office profit in this era was only about $100 or $200 million. But when he compared it to Eric's potential profit of over $100 million, all the excitement Blunt Cohen should have felt instantly vanished. "Then, you were responsible for signing the VAM agreement. What do we do now?" Blunt Cohen coldly glanced at everyone, and finally his eyes fell on Lester Reed. Chapter 28. Lester Reed sighed in his heart. Sure enough, he's taking it out on me. But in this case, he didn't dare to refute. Otherwise, he would definitely be kicked out. "Mr. Cohen, maybe we can try to negotiate with Eric Williams and sign a new agreement." "This is the idea you came up with?" Blunt Cohen sneered. "If you were Eric Williams, would you agree to sign a new agreement?" Lester Reed braced himself and said, "Eric Williams should know that according to the current box office trend, it is very unfair to Columbia, which has invested far more than him, so..." Before Lester Reed could finish, Blunt Cohen slammed the table and shouted, "Enough, fairness, when have you ever seen fairness in this world? I want a countermeasure that can fight for more benefits for Columbia, not a whimsical idea. Lester Reed lowered his head silently and didn't say anything. Blunt Cohen looked at the others, and finally his gaze fell on Amy Pascal, who was sitting at the end of the conference table. Amy Pascal was the only one in the conference room who objected to Eric Williams' VAM agreement, which ignited a glimmer of hope in his heart. Blunt Cohen softened his tone a little and said to Amy Pascal, "Amy, do you have any good ideas?" Although Blunt Cohen was speaking harshly in the conference room, Amy Pascal was a little absent-minded. She was completely disappointed in Blunt Cohen. He was conservative, lacked courage, was suspicious, and was not calm at all. He didn't have the demeanor of a leader at all. She didn't know how Coca-Cola chose such a mediocre president. Amy Pascal even felt that she should change her job. However, when she heard Blunt Cohen's question, Amy Pascal sorted out her thoughts and said, "Mr. Cohen, regarding the VAM agreement, I don't have the slightest idea of what to do. Even if we force the movie to be released, we won't be able to get the copyright for The Kid for free. Instead, we will face hundreds of millions of dollars of compensation from Eric Williams." At this point, Amy Pascal paused for a moment to give everyone a chance to think. Without waiting for Blunt Cohen to speak again, she continued, "So, what we should do now is to try our best to win over Eric Williams and seriously implement the VAM agreement to show Columbia's sincerity. The Kid's home box office will definitely exceed $50 million, so the overseas and other peripheral copyrights will return to Eric Williams. What's more, The Kid will definitely make a sequel. We have to maintain a good working relationship this time. When the sequel is made, I believe that with Eric Williams' shrewdness, he will definitely continue to work with us. I think this is the only way to get more benefits for Columbia." After Amy Pascal finished speaking, the other executives in the conference room couldn't help but nod their heads. Although Blunt Cohen somewhat agreed with Amy Pascal's point of view, when he thought about how Amy Pascal might be friends with Jeffrey Hansen and Eric Williams, his suspicious personality made him feel that Amy Pascal's suggestion was biased towards Eric. Therefore, Blunt Cohen couldn't help but say again, "Amy, you are an employee of Columbia. You have to think about the company as much as possible. Don't always side with outsiders. If you can think of a way to overturn the VAM agreement and get more benefits for us, I will immediately promote you." It was as if the scene from a few weeks ago had reappeared. She had worked hard, tried her best to pull in high-quality film projects for the company, and tried her best to give advice to the company. In the end, she was kicked out of the Kids' Home project team. She felt that she needed to avoid suspicion and had no complaints. Then, because she was the only one who objected to the wrong decision, she was asked to speak. She once again put forward a suggestion that she thought was reasonable, but was once again questioned. This made Amy Pascal feel a little cold. A strong feeling of grievance rushed to her head. She felt her nose slightly sour, and some kind of uncontrollable liquid gushed out of her eyes. Women were made of water. She was just a woman after all. She suddenly stood up, and the chair behind her was knocked over by her sudden movement, making a loud bang. "Mr. Cohen, I resign." A cold female voice sounded in the conference room. After saying this, Amy Pascal didn't organize the documents in front of her like last time. Instead, she turned around and left the office. "This is too much. This is too much. Who does she think she is?" Because of the Kids' Home incident, Blunt Cohen was already at a critical point, and he had no intention of reflecting on his mistakes. He slammed the table again and exploded. He turned around and said to his assistant behind him, "Inform security to get that B*TCH out of here immediately. Don't let me see her in the Columbia headquarters again." "Okay, Mr. Cohen." The assistant pinched his throat and agreed softly. He carefully got up and left the conference room. After taking a sip of coffee and stabilizing his emotions, Blunt Cohen said coldly, "Okay, let's continue. Keep your spirits up. Otherwise, I don't mind signing a few more termination papers today." Many of the executives felt that Amy Pascal's suggestion was the most correct. After all, those who could sit in this conference room were all very capable professional managers. However, Blunt Cohen was completely in a hysterical mood. At this time, no one would risk being fired to support Amy Pascal's suggestion. Therefore, the executives could only bite the bullet and discuss. After a few hours of discussion, everyone finally discussed a countermeasure. As soon as the meeting ended, Blunt Cohen couldn't wait to say to his assistant, "Help me contact Mr. Michael Eisner from Disney. I'll treat him to dinner tonight. Tell him that I have something important to discuss. It's about the kid." "Okay, Mr. Cohen." The assistant felt that Blunt Cohen's vicious aura had actually disappeared after the meeting. He heaved a sigh of relief and was no longer as fearful as before. The next morning, the $27.55 million box office of The Kid's Home was revealed in the newspapers. Eric, who had already received a lot of attention, became the focus of public opinion once again. Before the movie was released, a lot of news about Eric was just concocted by the two moguls to promote the movie. Now, it was completely the spontaneous behavior of the media. Under such circumstances, Eric, who had returned to Los Angeles late the night before, woke up to find that the door of his house, which had originally been empty of paparazzi, was now filled with reporters. Yes, the number of people could only be described as a pile. There was a clatter, and they were holding all kinds of cameras in their hands. Because Columbia had intentionally or unintentionally concealed it, Eric didn't immediately get the information about the box office of The Kid's Home. However, the moment he saw these reporters, Eric knew that the box office of The Kid had exploded. Although he was grateful that these reporters had used this method to inform him, Eric still didn't want to deal with them. After breakfast, he went straight to the garage. He planned to drive out of the reporters' encirclement and go to Columbia's headquarters to understand the situation. However, obviously, Eric didn't encounter such a glorious moment in his previous life. Therefore, the way he dealt with it was wrong. As soon as the car left the house, it was directly surrounded by a group of reporters. A few reporters even climbed onto the hood of his car. As they shouted questions, they unscrupulously took pictures of Eric in the driver's seat. Reporters in other directions also frantically knocked on the car door and shouted all kinds of questions. "Mr. Eric, what do you think of the $27.55 million box office of The Kid's Home in the first week? Mr. Williams, do you think The Kid will surpass E.T.? Eric, according to the VAM, you are about to become the youngest billionaire in Hollywood. What will you do with this money? Mr. Eric, I am a reporter from the Los Angeles Times. Can I do an exclusive interview with you?" Eric, as if a 10,000-word duck was constantly shouting in his ears, although Eric was a little excited when he heard the $27.55 million box office in the first week, he was more nervous and uneasy. There were too many reporters surrounding the car. He didn't dare to step on the gas pedal. The fat white reporter in front of the car was obviously eager to give it a try. He looked like he was asking for a collision. Chapter 29. Looking around through the crowd, Runkle's house in the West was empty. Less than 3 days after the release of Home Alone, Runkle and his wife hurriedly left the set with Stewart. It was said that someone had offered Stewart a high price to shoot an advertisement. When Eric was out of town, news of this family had already appeared in the newspapers. Due to the popularity of Home Alone, Stewart had earned millions through various endorsements and advertisements in just a few days. There was also news that his family had moved into a mansion in Beverly Hills. Although Zhang Zian hoped that Runkle and his wife would not be as greedy as Macaulay Culkin's parents in Zhang Zian's previous life, Eric could only hope that Stewart would not follow in Macaulay Culkin's footsteps. After all, the sequel of Home Alone still needed this clever little guy. In his previous life, without Macaulay Culkin, the box office of the third installment of Home Alone plummeted from $170 million to $18 million. Surrounded by reporters, Eric's imagination ran wild. Finally, after more than 10 minutes, someone noticed his predicament and called the police. Eric was then rescued by the police. Driving to the headquarters of Columbia, the two receptionists recognized Eric at a glance. They did not know the complicated feelings of the executives of Columbia regarding the box office of Home Alone. They only knew that Eric was about to become the youngest billionaire in Hollywood. Therefore, after notifying the CEO's office, the two girls tried their best to get close to Eric. If this young and rich man took a liking to them, they would immediately fly to the top. Eric was also happy to tease the two beautiful vases. He even told a few slightly flirtatious jokes, making the two girls giggle. Unknowingly, two small cards with contact information written on them appeared in his hands, emitting the smell of perfume. "Hey, Eric." While chatting with the receptionist, Eric suddenly heard Blunt Cohen's voice. Turning around, he saw that Blunt Cohen had already opened his arms. Eric walked up to him enthusiastically and hugged him. "Mr. Blunt, why did you come down personally? You could have sent someone to bring me up." Blunt Cohen laughed and said, "Why? Do you think this old man is interrupting you young people flirting?" "Of course not," Eric quickly denied. Blunt Cohen said, "Home Alone has achieved such great box office results. It's only right for me to pick you up personally. Let's go. Let's talk business first before thinking about dating girls. Young people should still put their careers first." Eric nodded, waved the pink card in his hand to the two girls, and followed Blunt Cohen to the elevator. Watching Blunt Cohen and Eric walk into the VIP elevator, a petite girl at the front desk asked the other girl with some anticipation, "Milia, do you think Eric will ask me out?" The tall blonde Milia leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Who knows? Maybe Eric will ask both of us out at the same time. Are you willing?" How can that be?" Thinking of some possible scenarios, the petite girl's face became slightly hot. Milia suddenly laughed and said, "All right, Lisa, don't be delusional. From the way Eric Williams spoke just now, he's obviously a womanizer. The two of us together will definitely be played until there's nothing left of us left." "How is that possible? He's only 18 years old?" Although she had just been flirted with by Eric, the girl named Lisa had a very good impression of Eric. The world was like this. If an ordinary person flirted with them, the result would definitely be a beating by the security guards and thrown out of the Columbia headquarters. But if it was a young and handsome guy, the two girls would be flattered and have a good impression of him. Correction, it's an 18-year-old handsome guy who's about to become a billionaire. To be able to achieve so much at such a young age, the two of us together won't be able to catch him. Also, didn't you notice? When Mr. Blunt Cohen left just now, he glared at us, obviously warning us. So, Lisa, be realistic. Come to the nightclub with me tonight. I'll introduce you to two handsome guys." Lisa nodded in disappointment, but she still couldn't help but glance at the VIP elevator not far away. In the Columbia CEO's office, Blunt Cohen warmly asked Eric to sit on the sofa. He personally went to the wine cabinet to get a bottle of wine and said, "Eric, let's celebrate a little first. When Home Alone ends airing, I'll definitely hold a grand celebration for you. This bottle of white wine is produced by my winery in Burgundy. There's only one bottle left." Eric picked up the wine glass and smelled it skillfully. The amber liquid overflowed with a fresh pineapple aroma. Blunt Cohen had read Eric's file and knew that the young man in front of him couldn't have come into contact with such a top-grade wine before. He thought that Eric was pretending and asked with interest, "How does it feel?" Eric nodded and praised, "It's a great wine. It's not easy for Burgundy wine to produce a pineapple aroma." Blunt Cohen was a little surprised. "Eric, I didn't expect you to know so much about wine." "I just heard about it by chance," Eric said honestly. Blunt Cohen didn't delve into it. He picked up the wine glass and said, "Then, to the success of Home Alone, cheers." "Cheers." After drinking the wine, Blunt Cohen asked his assistant to clean up the wine glasses. He returned to his seat and said, "Eric, let's talk business now. This is the box office data for Home Alone last week. Take a look first." Eric took the file and opened it. The file not only contained the box office data for Home Alone, but also the box office data for all the movies that were showing that week. Home Alone was at the top of the list with a box office of $27.55 million. The second place movie, Back to 17, dropped to $13.12 million. Although this figure was already quite good, it was a lot worse than Home Alone. It's like this, Eric. Blunt Cohen straightened his back and said with a little shame on his face, "There's something we need your understanding about. It's about this week's release of Home Alone." Looking at the expression on Blunt Cohen's face, Eric had a bad feeling. He nodded and motioned for Blunt Cohen to continue. Blunt Cohen said, "According to our VAM contract, Columbia should have increased the number of screens to 2,000 this week. Unfortunately, because the box office of Home Alone far exceeded Columbia's expectations, we didn't prepare enough. As a result, we could only increase the number of screens by 500 this week." Although Blunt Cohen's reason was very reasonable, Eric still keenly felt that there was something wrong with it. "Then, Mr. Cohen, what does Columbia plan to do?" Eric asked calmly. "Eric, Columbia takes our agreement very seriously. However, this matter was beyond everyone's expectations. It's impossible for the theater companies to empty their screens to accommodate our bet. Therefore, Columbia has already negotiated a compensation agreement." Eric was slightly alarmed. "Compensation agreement?" "Yes, Eric, please don't worry. There will be no changes to the original VAM contract. On this basis, because of the loss caused by our underestimation, starting next week, on the basis of the agreement, we will increase the number of screens by 100 until the movie stops airing." "I think this is enough to show Columbia's sincerity," Blunt Cohen said with a smile. Eric nodded subconsciously. If that was really the case, this compensation agreement was indeed acceptable. However, Eric still felt that something was wrong. Seeing Eric nod, Blunt Cohen took out the prepared compensation agreement and pushed it in front of Eric. "This is the compensation agreement. Eric, you can take a look. If there's no problem, please sign it." Eric picked up the agreement and looked at it. The agreement was very short, with only a few clauses. The language was also very straightforward. On the surface, there were no contractual traps. However, Eric still said cautiously, "Mr. Cohen, can I show it to my lawyer? If there's no problem, I'll send the agreement back after signing it." "Of course there's no problem." Blunt Cohen nodded generously and said, "Then, let's talk about the overseas distribution of The Kid. Eric, due to the current popularity of this movie, the earlier it is released overseas, the higher the box office will be. If we miss the holiday schedule, the overseas box office will be reduced by at least half. Therefore, we want to take The Kid with $16 million or 8% of the overseas box office. What do you think?" "Mr. Cohen, 8% is a little." Blunt Cohen shook his head and said, "It's not little, Eric. After deducting the local theater's share and the high movie tax, we can only get about 20% of the overseas box office. You don't have to pay any price to get 8% of the box office. This is already very reasonable." Eric snorted in his heart. "What do you mean by not paying any price?" Without The Kid, Columbia would not have a single movie that could earn $50 million from the North American box office alone. In fact, in the whole of 1988, there were no more than 10 movies that could earn $50 million from the North American box office. Just based on the share of The Kid, Columbia's performance in the Big Six this year would directly jump from the bottom to the top 3. In fact, it was Columbia that benefited greatly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cohen, I need to think about it." Eric shook his head and rejected Blunt Cohen's proposal. Eric would not give up the benefits that he deserved just because he earned too much from the VAM. In his values, what belongs to you can be yours, but what belongs to me must be mine. As if he had expected Eric's answer, Blunt Cohen nodded and said, "Okay, Eric, go back and think about it, but please give me an answer as soon as possible." Walking out of Blunt Cohen's office, Eric happened to meet Lester Reed, who was in charge of the Kid project. "Hi, Lester. Good morning." Lester did not expect to meet Eric so coincidentally. His expression was a little unnatural. "Hello, Eric. Congratulations on the success of The Kid." "You too, Lester. You're in charge of The Kid. You'll definitely get a generous year-end bonus, right?" Lester cursed silently, but he didn't show it on his face. He just smiled awkwardly. "By the way, Lester, where is Ms. Pascal's office?" If it wasn't for her recommendation, the kid would not have been successful so easily. I want to thank her in person. Chi Dian. Com welcomes readers to visit and read our latest, fastest, and hottest serialized works on Chi Dian Originals. Chapter 30. Ha! Lester didn't expect Eric to suddenly ask about Amy Pascal. Pascal. Ms. Pascal resigned. Eric was puzzled. Resigned? Why? Lester's brain spun for a few seconds before he said, I'm not too sure either. Maybe the company didn't arrange for her to participate in the Home Alone project. She was a little dissatisfied, so she resigned. Eric could tell from Lester's twinkling eyes that he was lying, but he didn't expose him. With a disappointed expression, he said, That's a pity. In that case, I'll take my leave. It wasn't until Eric walked into the elevator that Lester knocked on the door and walked into Blunt Cohen's office. Blunt Cohen no longer had the smile he had when he greeted Eric. His brows were furrowed as he held a document, but his eyes were clearly not focused on it. Mr. Cohen, this is what you asked for. Lester put the folder in front of Blunt Cohen and hesitated for a moment before he said, I just ran into Eric Williams outside. He asked about Amy Pascal. Blunt Cohen suddenly raised his head and stared at Lester sharply. What did you say? When Lester saw Blunt Cohen's gaze, he subconsciously wanted to take a step back. He calmed himself down and said, I told him that Amy resigned because she was dissatisfied with the company not letting her participate in the Home Alone project. Blunt Cohen stared at Lester in silence. Lester continued, I don't think Eric Williams knows Amy Pascal very well. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked me where Amy Pascal's office is. I'm sure he would have gone to thank Amy in private. So, he probably wouldn't have gone to Amy to verify what I said. What do you think? Blunt Cohen's expression didn't relax at all. Lester's scalp was a little numb. He secretly cursed himself for always encountering unlucky things. Mr. Cohen, even if we were exposed, it wouldn't be a big deal. On the contrary, Eric would be dissatisfied with us, which would still be helpful for the plan. If he's dissatisfied with us, it would be easier for him to accept Disney's conditions. Blunt Cohen thought about it and was slightly relieved. He waved his hand and said, Okay, you can leave now. Driving on Hollywood Boulevard, Eric thought about what he had encountered in Columbia today. He was sure that Columbia was not willing to gain too much from the VAM and had started to take action. Now he had two clues. One was the compensation document in his hand, and the other was Amy Pascal. After parking the car in a parking lot far away from home, Eric walked into the house from the back door. He went to the second floor and looked outside. There were still many reporters in front of the door. When the reporters outside saw Eric suddenly appear at the window on the second floor, they immediately raised their cameras to take pictures. Looks like I need to move as soon as possible, Eric thought to himself. Then he laughed at himself. Even Runkle's family had moved to Beverly Hills. Eric realized that he only had a few $100s left. How poor could he be? Just as he was lost in thought, the phone behind him suddenly rang. Eric picked up the microphone. Williams, may I ask who you are? Is this Mr. Eric Williams? I am Mr. Michael Eisner's assistant. Mr. Eisner would like to invite you to lunch. I wonder if Mr. Eric is free? Disney CEO Michael Eisner. Eric was not surprised that the other party knew his contact information. He was just curious about the other party's intentions. Excuse me, may I know what this is about? The other party said, It's about Mr. Williams's Home Alone. Disney is interested in the overseas copyright of Home Alone. Since Columbia's offer was disappointing, Eric did not mind cooperating with other companies. Okay, where shall we meet? We will send someone to pick you up. They will be there soon. Eric hung up the phone and pondered for a while. He picked up the phone again and called Jeffrey Hansen. Jeffrey, this is Eric. Jeffrey Hansen's tone was a little excited. Hey, Eric, the box office of Home Alone was amazing. I called you this morning to congratulate you, but no one answered. Oh, sorry, I was at Columbia discussing some things. It's okay, Eric. Why are you looking for me? Eric said, when I went to Columbia today to discuss the release plan of Home Alone with Blunt Cohen, I found a lot of strange things. I feel that Columbia may be brewing some conspiracy. And I heard from Lester Reed that AI Me suddenly resigned. I was wondering if you could contact her. Jeffrey Hansen hesitated and said, Eric, I don't think it's useful to contact Amy. Even if Amy resigned, she would not reveal Columbia's trade secrets. Can you tell me what the anomalies are? You know, I have been in Hollywood for more than 20 years. Maybe I can give you some advice. Eric saw that he couldn't count on Amy Pascal, so he had to tell him what happened in the morning in detail. Jeffrey pondered for 2 minutes after listening and said, let the lawyer look at the compensation agreement. I think the problem may be here. If not, I can't see any other problems for the time being. Eric, can you remember any other details? Other details? Eric said to himself. He remembered the phone call and said, right, just before I called you, Disney's Michael Eisner suddenly invited me to lunch. He said he was interested in the overseas copyright of Home Alone. Michael Eisner. Jeffrey repeated the name. His voice suddenly became a little louder, and he said, Michael Eisner and Blunt Cohen are friends. Eric, you must be careful. Don't agree to anything from Michael Eisner. Columbia's overseas share of Home Alone is very low, and then Disney's Michael Eisner contacted you because of this matter. God doesn't believe that there is no relationship between the two. Eric listened to Jeffrey's advice. He suddenly saw a silver car outside the house from the corner of his eye, so he said, Jeffrey, the car that Michael Eisner sent to pick me up has arrived. Then go, Eric. Remember, no matter how extravagant the other party is, you don't have to agree to anything. Eric nodded and agreed. He hung up the phone and went downstairs. After revealing his identity to the other party, the driver of the car and another man squeezed through the reporters and escorted Eric into the car. Half an hour later, Eric met Michael Eisner at the Hilton Hotel. At this time, Michael Eisner was only in his 40s and was in the prime of his life. At this age, he was in charge of Disney, one of the big six. It was inevitable that he would be high-spirited, but he had not evolved into the tyrant of Disney. He was also very amiable. I really envy you, Eric. When I was 18 years old, I was still complacent about getting into Denison University, but you have already reached a height that many people can't reach in their lifetime. In the restaurant of the Hilton Hotel, Michael Eisner and Eric were not in a hurry to get to the point. Instead, they chatted casually. Actually, I was going to get into the University of California, Mr. Eisner. Unfortunately, something happened in my family and I had to walk the path of self-reliance. Fortunately, my luck was better. Michael Eisner shook his head and said, No, it's definitely not luck, Eric. Although we've only met for the first time, I know about your deeds. If you were a person without talent, even if the goddess of luck favored you, you wouldn't have achieved such amazing achievements. You're one of the most outstanding young people I've ever met. Thank you for your compliment, Mr. Eisner. You're also one of the people I admire the most. There aren't many people at your age who are in charge of a movie giant. Michael Eisner obviously enjoyed Eric's compliment. He smiled and said, Since I'm one of them, can I know who you admire the most, Eric? Eric thought for a while and said, The one I admire the most should be Howard Hughes. Oh, Michael Eisner nodded and said, That's indeed a legendary figure. Speaking of which, Eric, there are some similarities between the two of you. Maybe you're a little more outstanding than him. The reason why he could achieve so much was mostly due to inheriting his father's huge inheritance. But you didn't rely on anyone, and now you're about to become the youngest billionaire. Eric listened to Michael Eisner's praise and smiled shyly. If he hadn't been reborn, he would probably be in the company's simple studio, shooting some TV commercials for health products. If you ignored Michael Eisner's domineering personality, he was indeed a very charismatic person. The two of them chatted as they ate, and the atmosphere was quite pleasant. If he hadn't called Jeffrey Hansen in advance and made Eric wary of Michael Eisner, Eric might have become friends with Michael Eisner. After the waiter removed the cutlery, Michael Eisner said, "Okay, Eric, let's talk about business." Chapter 31. Eric sat up slightly and said, "Mr. Eisner, please speak." Michael Eisner, who was about to speak, hesitated slightly. During the conversation, not only did Eric have a good impression of him, but Michael Eisner also had a good impression of Eric. He didn't feel like he was talking to an immature young man, but more like he was talking to peers. Thinking about how Eric had achieved such amazing results in such a short time, Michael Eisner doubted whether it was a good idea to accept Columbia's conditions and work together to trick Eric. This young man was only 18 years old, and his future was limitless. If he became enemies with Eric because of this incident, the chances of them working together in the future would be slim. As a leader, Michael Eisner was undoubtedly a decisive person. Thinking about Blunt Cohen's conditions, Michael Eisner made up his mind again. The success of the kid was a complete anomaly. Whether the young man in front of him could achieve such dazzling success or not, even if he was still outstanding in the future, Michael Eisner felt that in the face of enough benefits, the two sides were still likely to cooperate. Many opponents who used to be enemies could make peace again, not to mention that Columbia was the one who tricked Eric. "Eric, Disney is very interested in the overseas distribution rights of the kid. Disney's main focus is on movies aimed at young people. We have more advantages in the distribution of this type of movie than other movie companies. If the kid is given to Disney to distribute, I believe that it will achieve better results overseas than in North America." Eric asked calmly, "Mr. Eisner, can I know Disney's offer?" 12% of the overseas box office. What do you think? Eric's expression changed slightly, and he asked, "Does Disney not want a buyout?" Michael Eisner shook his head and smiled. "Eric, you would rather sign an VAM with Columbia than accept a buyout. So I won't waste time on this." Eric nodded. "If that's the case, then the price is very reasonable. Columbia only offered me an 8% share. So, Disney is very sincere. I hope we can cooperate again in the future." Michael Eisner smiled and continued, "Then, Eric, if you agree, I want to sign the licensing agreement as soon as possible. It's not as easy to release a movie overseas as it is in North America. After signing the agreement, it will take at least a week for the movie to appear in foreign cinemas. With the popularity of Home Alone, if it's released a day later, the box office will lose millions of USD. Eric, who was quietly listening to Michael Eisner's lobbying, quickly analyzed a series of clues in his mind. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his face. He gradually understood Columbia's trick. Although it wasn't very clever, it was very effective. If he wasn't careful, he might fall into the trap. After understanding this, Eric finally relaxed. He picked up the coffee cup in front of him and gently rubbed the delicate ceramic. He looked up at Michael Eisner and asked, "Mr. Eisner, if I agree, when can we sign the contract?" Although Michael Eisner noticed that Eric's expression was a little strange, he was still happy to hear his words. He said, "Of course, the sooner the better. I'll get someone to draft the agreement as soon as possible. We can sign it this afternoon." Putting down the coffee cup, Eric stared at Michael Eisner and said, "Then, Mr. Eisner, do you think it's like this?" "Huh?" Michael Eisner was a little confused. Eric said, "Columbia is not willing to accept the VAM, so they found you and offered you some conditions that you can't refuse. Maybe because of the benefits, or because you and Mr. Blunt Cohen are good friends, so you agreed." "Because I don't know when you can convince me." To be on the safe side, Columbia reduced the screens in the second week to 1,500. For this, they are willing to pay an extra 100 screens in the following weeks. Michael Eisner listened to Eric's words and was stunned at first. Then, he smiled bitterly. He had underestimated the young man in front of him. Eric was very satisfied with Michael Eisner's reaction. He continued, "The reason why Columbia paid such a price is to delay the box office of The Kids to reach $50 million and buy more time for you to lobby. Because of our VAM, if the final box office is less than $50 million, all the copyrights of The Kids will belong to Columbia. Now that the box office has not reached $50 million, all the copyrights of the kids will still belong to the VAM. If I rashly sign the licensing agreement with Disney, then I will be the first to breach the contract, and Columbia will be able to tear up the VAM on the grounds that I violated the terms of the bet. Am I right? If the whole thing had nothing to do with him, given Michael Eisner's personality, he would definitely clap and cheer after hearing Eric's brilliant analysis. Now, Michael Eisner could only smile awkwardly. Eric stood up. I don't think we need to continue talking, Mr. Eisner. Michael Eisner also stood up and said, There is indeed no need, Eric. But I still have to say that it was a pleasure chatting with you. I hope we can have a chance to work together in the future. Maybe. Eric nodded. Since the other party did not trick him, Eric would not fall out with a movie giant. Mr. Eisner, can you tell me what Columbia offered you? Michael Eisner shook his head. Eric, this is a trade secret. Eric did not comment. He said, Then, Mr. Eisner, can you ask the driver to send me back? Of course, no problem. Michael Eisner waved to his assistant not far away and said a few words. As soon as Eric walked out of the Hilton Hotel, more than a dozen reporters waiting outside quickly surrounded him. They had learned through various channels that Eric had just met with Disney's president, Michael Eisner, so they were looking forward to interviewing the two of them. Seeing the reporters rushing over, the Hilton Hotel security quickly protected Eric. Michael Eisner's driver was about to escort Eric to the parking lot when Eric stopped. The reporters were separated by the security. They were disappointed that Eric would leave quietly again, but they did not expect Eric to stop. The reporters quickly raised their cameras and recorders. Eric, what did you talk about with Mr. Michael Eisner? Is it related to Home Alone? Eric, your current two movies are targeted at young audiences, which is very consistent with Disney's business philosophy. Are you going to join Disney? Eric did not answer the reporter's questions. He gestured for everyone to be quiet with his hands and said, Can you listen to me for a while? Since Eric was willing to take the initiative to speak, the reporters quickly quieted down. Mr. Eisner just invited me to dinner and we did talk about some things. As for the specific content, it is not convenient to disclose it to everyone here. But we had a good chat. Maybe there is a possibility of cooperation in the future. Seeing that the reporters did not get what they wanted and were restless again, Eric quickly said, Don't worry, everyone. Actually, I want everyone to help me make a statement. The reporters were a little confused, but a few smart reporters keenly felt that Eric's next words were going to be big news. They quickly perked up and held the recorders in their hands closer to the front. First of all, I am very grateful to Columbia Pictures for helping to distribute my movie, Home Alone. But Eric's face became serious. I want to say that because of the VAM agreement I signed before, my share of the profits will be much higher than Columbia's, but that is what I deserve. I have a clear conscience. Moreover, if the agreement is seriously implemented, Columbia will still receive nearly $50 million of North American box office revenue. This result of accounting for half of Columbia's annual box office profit is enviable. Therefore, I solemnly warn some people, please put away your greed and don't use any despicable means to try to tear up the VAM agreement. Strictly follow the agreement and continue to distribute Home Alone. If Columbia violates the VAM agreement again, I don't mind seeing you in court. Although I am still weak in your eyes, I believe that we are equal before the federal law. If you think the success of Home Alone and Back to 17 is not enough to prove anything, then I will see you in the next movie. That's all I have to say. Take care. As soon as Eric finished speaking, the reporters around him were in an uproar. Eric, can you be more specific? Eric, you already have a plan for your next movie. Can you talk about the theme? Eric, does your meeting with Mr. Michael Eisner have anything to do with Columbia's attempt to tear up the agreement? Eric. After Eric finished speaking, in the midst of the uproar, he silently went directly to the parking lot under the escort of the security guards and got into the car. Chi Dien. Com welcomes readers to visit and read our latest, fastest, and hottest serialized works on Chi Dien Originals. Mobile users can read at m.com. Chapter 32. When he got home, Eric saw a lot of reporters outside his door. He could only call his lawyer to come to his house to discuss the compensation agreement. Although he was sure of Columbia's trick, he still felt that it was better to be careful. After that, Eric finally remembered to call Jennifer Aniston. He dialed her number several times, but no one answered. At this time, Jennifer Aniston should be at home. Worried, Eric put down the phone and was about to call again when the phone suddenly rang. William's house. Eric picked up the phone. "Eric, it's me." Jennifer Aniston's voice came from the other side. Eric said happily, "And are you okay? I've been trying to call your apartment, but no one picked up. I moved to my dad's place, Eric. Don't you know? The paparazzi found out about our relationship and followed me everywhere. They even pretended to be delivery men and knocked on my apartment door. I was scared." Jennifer Aniston's voice still had a hint of fear. Eric said anxiously, "And are you okay? By the way, when did this happen? I called you before I got on the plane yesterday. Weren't you okay?" "I'm fine, Eric. It was this morning. I don't know how the paparazzi found out. Anyway, it was in the newspaper this morning. They said. Jennifer Aniston's voice was a little unhappy. Eric thought that it was definitely not something good. He could only comfort her. "Well, and it's good that you're okay. Stay with your dad for a while. Quit your job at the convenience store." Jennifer Aniston complained unhappily, "Eric, it won't always be like this, right? How can I live then?" Eric said, "Of course it won't always be like this. It will be fine after a while. Actually, my house is surrounded by a lot of reporters. Give me your dad's address. I'll visit you when I'm free." Jennifer Aniston told him the address. Eric wrote it down and comforted her for a while before hanging up. In a villa in Beverly Hills, Jennifer Aniston hung up the phone unhappily. Glancing at the pile of crumpled newspapers on the floor, she picked up a pillow on the sofa and hammered it a few times. The newspapers described her relationship with Eric as a Hollywood version of The Prince and Cinderella, exaggerating Eric and belittling herself at the same time. Almost all the newspapers were not optimistic about their future. Some even compared her and Drew, and the conclusion was that Drew was more suitable to be Eric's girlfriend than her. In the end, Jennifer Aniston gradually felt a sense of inferiority and uneasiness. In her heart, Eric was so outstanding, and she was so ordinary. Now, he was about to become the youngest billionaire in Hollywood, while she was the convenience store salesperson mentioned in the newspaper. The gap between the two of them was getting bigger and bigger. Eric didn't know about Jennifer Aniston's dilemma. After waiting for half an hour, the lawyer in charge of the VAM agreement rushed over. "Hello, Mr. Edward. Thank you for coming in person." Eric invited Edward Lewis, the lawyer in charge of the VAM agreement, and his assistant into the room and said. Edward Lewis quickly reached out and shook hands with Eric, and said with a little respect in his tone, "Eric, I didn't expect Home Alone to be so popular. Congratulations. This is my assistant, Carter." The three of them sat down on the sofa. Eric took out the compensation agreement given by Columbia and explained what had happened. Edward Lewis quietly listened to Eric's narrative, picked up the compensation agreement and looked at it carefully. After a few minutes, he said, "Eric, there is no problem with this agreement. You can sign it without worry." "That's good." Eric nodded with relief, took out a pen and signed it directly. Edward Lewis looked at Eric, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Eric, I think maybe you need a full-time team of lawyers to take care of your daily legal affairs." Eric heard Edward Lewis's recommendation and raised his head with a smile. Edward Lewis looked at Eric's smile and didn't beat around the bush. He said directly, "I think my firm is capable enough to take care of this matter, Eric. From your description just now, if you are not vigilant enough, you might face the situation of the VAM agreement being torn up. So, I think my legal team can be your agent and be fully responsible for the next negotiations with Columbia. If Colombia breaches the agreement again, we can do our best to defend you and ensure your interests. From the time when the VAM agreement was drafted, Eric had seen the professionalism of Edward and his legal team. And Eric knew that he really needed a full-time legal team now. After a few words, the two sides quickly reached an agreement. Edward Lewis took out a representative authorization agreement that had been prepared long ago, and Eric signed his name on it. Then, I'll leave the rest to you, Edward. You can pass this compensation agreement to Colombia. I really don't want to deal with them anymore. Okay, Eric, if there is nothing else, we will leave first. After sending Edward and his assistant away, Eric finally breathed a sigh of relief. Now, he could concentrate on his passion, the film career. He was very confident in Edward Lewis's firm. After all, the other party was only his agent and did not have the power to make decisions for him. If the other party conspired with Colombia to plot against him, then once the matter was exposed, in this country where credibility was extremely important, the career of everyone in the firm would be ruined. Colombia would not be able to offer a price to support a large number of people for the rest of their lives. Eric was indeed relieved, but Colombia was caught in a whirlpool of public opinion because of Eric's statement. Because of Eric's statement, many newspapers that had been finalized were reformatted again. After all, the news was too explosive. In the evening, Eric's statement condemning Colombia appeared in the newspapers. All kinds of analysis and speculation quickly appeared in all media. In order to increase sales, most newspapers chose to fan the flames. After publishing Eric's statement as it was, the newspapers began to analyze it word by word. It had to be said that the power of imagination was strong. Some newspapers somehow connected Eric's statement with Michael Eisner. Before Eric's statement, he did trick Michael Eisner a little, saying that the two had a good chat and that there was a chance to cooperate. This made the newspapers speculate that Michael Eisner played a positive role in exposing Colombia's cheap tricks. Michael Eisner was still hesitating about how to tell his old friend that Eric had exposed the tricks of both sides. When he saw the news in the newspapers, he quickly called Blunt Cohen to explain. Unfortunately, the other party obviously didn't believe him. Michael Eisner could only smile wryly. He was also aware of Blunt Cohen's suspicious character. Inwardly, he sighed that their friendship had come to an end. However, for some reason, he didn't feel too much resentment towards Eric. Instead, he felt some admiration for him. Some newspapers quickly found out that this week, Home Alone only had 1,500 screens, which was even less than the 1,600 screens of Back to 17, which had increased the number of screens. This discovery made the media scold Colombia, and at the same time, they began to question Colombia's integrity. The media controlled by other film companies were jealous that Colombia had monopolized the Home Alone cake. They condemned it and even called for fans to boycott Colombia and refused to watch Colombia's movies in some tabloids. After the news appeared in the newspapers, Colombia's public hotline was directly bombarded with calls from people with a sense of justice. Several female employees who were responsible for answering public calls were all scolded until they cried. Two of the girls submitted their resignation letters the next morning. After Colombia's president, Blunt Cohen, smashed everything in the office, he had no choice but to call for an immediate meeting with the executives of the Public Relations Department to discuss countermeasures. That night, the TV station controlled by Colombia issued a statement to defend the number of screens of Home Alone this week and announced the compensation agreement between the two sides. At the same time, it implied that Eric's claim that Colombia intended to tear up the agreement was purely false. It was entirely because of the dispute over the number of screens that Eric had a bad association. However, because Eric didn't stand up to respond, the media and the public generally didn't believe Colombia's explanation. Chapter 33. The next day, the impact of the incident continued to spread. While most of the newspapers were condemning Colombia, they somehow shifted their anger to Colombia's owner, Coca-Cola. They began to criticize Coca-Cola's management strategy for Colombia. After all, Columbia Pictures' performance in the past few years had been terrible. Coca-Cola did not care about this small matter at first. Surprisingly, after the stock market opened that day, Coca-Cola's stock price, which was very stable, fell by 1.7%. This number may seem insignificant, but when multiplied by tens of billions of dollars in market value, it was not easy to calm down. Coca-Cola's CEO, Gwasida, directly scolded Blunt Cohen over the phone. He ordered Blunt Cohen to quickly resolve this matter, or else he would be fired from his position as Columbia's CEO. Under the pressure from Coca-Cola's headquarters, Blunt Cohen personally held a press conference at Columbia at 10 o'clock in the morning. He apologized to Eric politely and promised that he would seriously implement the VAM agreement. After receiving the news, Eric, of course, did not want to make things worse. He immediately asked his personal lawyer, Edward Lewis, to publish a statement of understanding on the Los Angeles Times. The storm quickly subsided. Perhaps because of the breach of contract, the box office of Home Alone, which was supposed to drop by a certain amount, did not drop by the second week. Instead, it increased by a lot. It received $28.76 million in box office and broke through the 50 million mark in 2 weeks. At the same time, Back to 17 received $14.73 million in box office and was still in second place on the box office chart. The total box office of the two movies related to Eric even exceeded 50% of the North American box office for that week. This once again shocked some people. Although the results were still amazing, the media's attention on Eric slowly decreased. After the reporters near Eric's house could not find any useful news for a few days, they finally left one after another. During this week, Eric basically stayed at home and focused on writing the Resident Evil that he promised Michael Krauss. In his previous life, there were two versions of the Resident Evil story. One was the story of the game, and the other was the story of the movie with Alice as the main character. Unfortunately, Eric had only played the 4th and 6th generation of Resident Evil, so he didn't know much about the game's story. Obviously, there wasn't much to write about in the movie version. On the basis of the game's content, it was completely Mira Jovovich's solo cheat show. Therefore, the writing of Resident Evil was not as easy as Jurassic Park. Eric spent 3 days to come up with an outline with Leon as the male lead. The content started from when Lion joined the police force until everyone worked together to escape from Raccoon City where the virus broke out. Eric had skillfully integrated the main characters from his previous life, Chris, Jill, and Weskier, into this novel. Of course, Sister Wang, who was the most popular gamer in China, would definitely be there. Eric mischievously turned the relationship between Ada Wong and Leon into the relationship between the Queen and her pet boy. This wasn't Eric's original creation. On the internet in his previous life, some gamers commented on the relationship between the two with this view. In the game, the elegant and seductive Ada Wong often encountered little Leon who was in deep water and hot water when she was on a mission. She calmly helped him out of his predicament, teased him as usual, and left with a rocket launcher with lipstick stains. Every time this plot was played, it was easy for people to associate it with some evil images. Little baby, come here. Patting head. Okay, there's nothing for you to do, go play somewhere else. Eric walked out of the kitchen with a cup of water and made coffee for James Brooks, who was sitting on the sofa in the living room reading part of the manuscript of Resident Evil. James, what do you think? Eric handed the coffee to James and sat down across from him. It's quite graphic, it makes people feel like they're in the movie, it's very exciting. Eric nodded. James's comments were very pertinent. Because of his profession in his previous life, Eric unconsciously used a lot of montage techniques in his writing. The biggest feature of this writing method was that it gave people a sense of graphic. What if it's turned into a movie? Eric asked again. James put down the manuscript and said seriously, I don't think this novel is suitable to be made into a movie at this stage. Although the zombie theme is loved by many people, the base is too small. Therefore, the movie can only be made with small investments. If this novel is turned into a movie, it needs a lot of special effects. If the investment is too small, it won't be able to achieve the desired effect. Therefore, it's best if the special effects technology can be developed for a few years and become cheaper. As expected of a top producer, he outlined the limitations of Resident Evil and the future of the adaptation in just a few sentences. In his previous life, Resident Evil fans often complained that the Resident Evil movie series had too little investment and that the special effects weren't explosive enough. Why was it always Mira and not other big names? They didn't know that if the movie was made according to the fans' wishes, because of the movie's rating and audience, the movie company would definitely lose money. After talking about Resident Evil for a while, Eric asked James why he came. "Invite me to Fox's party?" He thought James came for the overseas copyright of The Kid in the Home, but he didn't expect it to be something else. In the past few days, Eric had received a lot of calls and invitations related to The Kid in the Home. Even Michael Eisner, who originally wanted to work with Columbia to screw him over, personally called him again. But he already had his own plans, so he directly rejected all of them. Seeing Eric's surprised expression, James smiled and said, "Of course, you think I'm here for The Kid in the Home, right? In the past few days, a lot of people have reached out to you, but I heard you rejected them all. I think maybe you're waiting for Fox to take the initiative, right?" The surprise in Eric's eyes disappeared. He was indeed waiting for Fox to contact him first, so he could take the initiative. Since the other party already guessed it and let James Brooks, the Gold producer, personally invite him, Eric would seem petty if he denied it. Eric shrugged and smiled. "I do have this idea, James. After all, our cooperation is quite pleasant." James said sincerely, "So, I came here in person today. In fact, Mr. Barry Diller wants to meet with you to talk about The Kid in the Home, Jurassic Park, and your next movie." "Oh, Fox is really greedy." James smiled and said, "This has nothing to do with greed, Eric, this is business. If Fox doesn't make a move, other companies will also be interested. Of course, Fox won't be as short-sighted as Columbia. We hope that both sides can cooperate equally and mutually benefit each other." Eric wasn't stupid enough to believe these words. Fox said this because they didn't get the distribution rights for The Kid in the Home. Otherwise, because of the VAM, who knew what other party would do. The wiretapping scandal in his previous life was only the tip of the iceberg of these giants' dirty deeds. But now, Eric had to choose a giant as his backer. This way, he could reduce the outside world's greed for him, better protect himself while secretly developing his strength. After some consideration, Eric chose Fox. In the next few years, Fox, led by Barry Diller, would mainly focus on creating a Fox network. Therefore, relatively speaking, they would pay less attention to movies. This created a good opportunity for Eric, the little sparrow, to occupy more resources in the turtledove's nest. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.